Welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. How are you? Good
Can you hear me?
afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Are we ready? We'll start exactly at 2 o'clock, isn't it?
I'm ready.
Yeah. Alexa. Alexa. Yeah.
We can start.
We can
Hello,
start, isn't it?
Srivatsam
Okay.
sir.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Srivatsam
Welcome all
sir.
to
Good
the
afternoon.
afternoon session.
Hello.
Over to you, the team from Carnegie College. Please take over the session. Thank you all.
Okay. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir, you are.
Yeah. Welcome you all to the second section of the Marthama Higher Education Council webinar on higher education and cyberspace, reconfiguring the institutional strategies. This session is hosted by St. Thomas College, Korancheri, and we at St. Thomas College are extremely happy to welcome you all to this very relevant and aptly titled topic, e-content, design and delivery. Myself,
Okay.
Suresh Matthew George, Assistant Professor of Economics, St. Thomas College. And our resource person for this session is Dr. K.R. Srivatsan, visiting professor at IIT Bhubaneswar. He is one of the leading techno educator in our country and is instrumental in transforming e-learning and application of IT in education, agriculture, governance, and research and development in the various fields he played as first director of Indian Institute of Information Technology and Management, Kerala, and the pro vice chancellor of IGNO and many more. We all know that COVID-19 has accelerated the process of digital learning than any other deliberate measures taken by the authorities. And we have seen how an unseen virus is transforming the digitalization process of the education in an unforeseen manner. Content design and delivery are the two pillars of the e-learning process and will play a crucial role in the forthcoming blended learning era that is UGC is envisaging. So before we start the formal section, let me invite Ms. Suji Anna Varghese, Assistant Professor of Botany, St. Thomas College, Korancheri, to formally welcome this gathering.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected distinguished dignitaries, invited guests, principals of member institution, executive members, moderator for this session, Professor Suresh Matthew George, and dear participants, a warm welcome to one and all. I would embrace this as a moment of pride to introduce an eminent dignitary as the resource person for this session, Professor K.R. Srivatsan. Professor Srivatsan is the visiting professor of the School of Electrical Sciences, IIT Bhubaneswar. Sir has extensive background in the field of electrical engineering. He has obtained his bachelor's degree from Regional Engineering College, now NIT, West Bengal, MTech from IIT Kanpur, and PhD from Queen's University, Canada. Sir has served as the director of Chinmaya Institute of Technology, Kanpur, former head of the Department of Electrical Engineering, IIT Kanpur, and also as the senior professor in Indus World Business School, Greater Noida, UP. Sir was also the pro vice chancellor of Indira Gandhi National Open University, IGNO, New Delhi. The invitation from Sir as the first director of Institute of Information Technology and Management, Technopark, Trivandrum, marks his erudition in his field of interest. Professor Srivatsan is the founding member of the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning, NPTEL. Currently, he is working with NPTEL to start the Virtual Institute of Technology and Science to commence certificate courses using NPTEL content. with about 40 plus years of experience in research, teaching, education, introduction of new courses in advanced technologies, building and modernizing laboratories, leading innovator in ICT applications for education. Professor Srivatsan is the best in town that we can have to handle this session on e-content design and delivery. With great honor and respect, we cordially welcome you to address this session. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. First, may I acknowledge the management of Thoma, the revered father, and the AMKS, Matthew, and others, and Dr. Shirley to invite me to deliver this address. The subject is very vast, so what I won't be able to do much justice in this. I also thank Suji Verghese for a kind introduction. Some minor corrections are necessary. I finished my term as visiting professor in IIT Bhubaneswar. I was with Odisha State Open University till recently, and now I am trying to work towards setting up some center of digital learning in Jharkhand. Although sitting in Bhubaneswar, I reside in Bhubaneswar, so I miss Kerala a lot because I was there for 8 years grooming Triple IT. In fact, I had the privilege of starting it from virtually a table and chair. That's all I had. Within 3 months, we managed to set up the Triple IT and start the first PGT program in IT. It was very successful and it continues to grow. Of course, it has now nurtured the Kerala Digital University. Morning, I heard Professor Rajan Gurukal as well as Professor Saji Gopinath. They had certain general things to say, but I want to be more specific. The challenge of conducting a course is fundamental. What is a course? That site should not be lost. So I'm going to give you a perspective, which is a very short perspective. If time permits, one of you can arrange a 10 lecture series on this, and I'll try to take IIITMK help to develop a 10 lecture course to expose teachers on various components involved in. Actually, we need teachers as well as the technology support persons, because things are going to happen from education cloud. Education cloud will become the anchor, and our thinking should not be restricted to a particular college or a particular course and such things. So, and what I'm going to give you is a perspective which I call as TALCOM, or Technology Augmented Learning and Course Management. So it is more than e-content. Now there is plenty of e-content available in some sense, like NPTEL video lectures are there. I was part of the virtual labs also, and quite a number of about 80 labs are available online, and we can conduct courses for you. I can take help from NIT Warangal and conduct courses on virtual labs. I can arrange for it. And the most important thing is we should not lose sight of the role of teachers in course development and class management is central in e-learning. So I'm going to take more people-centric view of things rather than technology or content-centric view of things. Can I go to the next slide? Yeah, next slide. I think, yeah, thanks. Well, first let us see what are we doing. I think we want to generate competent, good students who are confident of facing the world. I was teaching at Chinmaya Institute of Technology. Swami Tejo Mayananda, the chief of Chinmaya Mission at that time, always used to emphasize to our teachers and students 3 attributes we must address. These are universal principles. Firstly, any graduate completing a program should be competent in skills and knowledgeable in the subject of the study. The second is the ethics or whatever, something more than that. Be emotionally mature, have some strong inner values to face various kinds of situations as they arise in life. And thirdly, he or she should be motivated to nurture aspirations to be and to achieve worthy pursuits in life. Maybe some of them may like to become entrepreneurs, some of them may pursue some other vocation, and so on. In a shorter way, Swami Vivekananda said, I was also a student of Vivekananda College at Chennai in my pre-university days. We want that education by which character is formed, strength of mind increased, intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet. These are very general principles applicable whether e-learning or not, because it ultimately the human beings we are targeting. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So our focus should be on each course, because ultimately course are the basic units of a degree program, or for that matter even a school program or other thing. What is a course is something we have to understand. Okay. Now there are two levels at which courses. One is the suite of courses, the list of courses the student does over a period of 3 or 4 years in the graduate program. And that plus they mostly do courses. They do sometimes some projects, some internships, and so on, and that completes a program. At the end of the program, the student should become a competent person, like along the principles that I stated before, okay, or I quoted before. In quality education, the most important thing is we desire outcome based education. Everybody talks about it, but nobody gives direction. One is that this outcome based education has to be seen at two different levels in entirely different ways. One is at the entire program level, how to design the suite of courses which will create graduates worthy of employment and whatever the graduates' interest, and so on. And secondly, at each course level, how do we achieve outcome based education? My focus will be more on the second, and as I said, it's a vast subject, and I will need more opportunity to do this. Okay. Yes, I think my presentation is gone. Can you get it? Can you get back the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll get it back in 1 moment. Somebody else has put in a presentation. I will correct it right now.
Okay, Anu Varghese came the name. Okay, yeah. Right. So the first thing is, first for the graduate program has to spell out the graduate attribute profile. This is very deeply discussed in something, a document called Washington Accord, which is an international agreement on STEM education, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But we can adapt it and call it scholar attribute profile or something like that. How to achieve this? Again, that's a vast subject, so I'll just skip for this because we are going to focus on the course. Okay, and the university must design this suite of courses. Already we have anyway some suite of courses, but they may have to be relooked in the light of the requirements of the graduate attribute profile. Then you have outcome based education, that is at the end of the degree program the student is competent, or the graduate is competent in this, that, and this capability, and so on. Okay, I'll mention it a little later, what is graduate attribute profile as viewed from the Washington Accord perspective. So the other thing is that how to achieve outcome based or OBE in the courses, how to shape e-learning accordingly. So e-learning is subservient to our requirement to achieve OBE, that is outcome based education. Next slide. Yeah. What is a course? As to a person starts with a point A of background, certain earlier scholarship, etc. The requirements to get admitted to a course. We try to achieve that the students in a class doing the same course are broadly equally equipped to take up the course. And so that is why we have the sequence of courses, and then they are taken through or walked through a set of learning activities, class activities, online activities, etc. The proper sequence through in each lesson, maybe there are different types of activity. So sequence of lessons that constitute a course to achieve a level of proficiency at level B, which will say, yes, this student has now these competencies, these skills, this knowledge, etc. So that this knowledge they have acquired in this course can be used to take subsequent courses, or it will be applicable in certain real world work and so on. So the basic unit of course is a unit of education is a course. We ensure all students in a class have stated background for learning the course. That is the purpose of selection. Actually, I believe it is possible to give quality education to all students of India without any restriction. In a broad manner, those people who can get into the college, they can do it in some way. Maybe colleges can have evening access to labs and other things. We can do a course in other way, but they all do the same type of courses. Same. So nobody needs to be denied in education. Quality education to all, independent of geography, is becoming possible now. In fact, it can create certain entrepreneurship to manage such kind of courses and support the colleges and universities for that. So first is we restate by expanding on given course objectives by adding how the students will be engaged. One, how do we stay in what kind of class activities, what kind of home activities or residence activities, what kind of online activities, what kind of assessment activities. They are broadly the 4 types of activities the student will be engaged in the course. The teacher's role is to oversee that they are all engaged in these activities in the appropriate sequence, oversee their assessment, give them counseling, guidance, and with modern platforms like learning management systems, somebody talked about, even Rajan Gurukul was talking about using Moodle and such things. There are tools available. One can apply various methods. So it is possible now to pay personal attention to each student by the teacher in deeper ways than we ever thought, provided we become proficient in the learning management system. The key thing to conduct this is today the university provides a curriculum, but curriculum does not teach. How the curriculum should be mapped to the teaching activities, the sequence of activities in the class engagement, etc. For example, today we talk about flipped class, where the students take the video lectures like NPTEL in that hostel or residence or whatever, and come to the class to do class activities overseen by the teacher, maybe demonstration activities, problem solving activities, and so on. Okay, so so to make sure that this is done coherently, if 30 colleges under a university are teaching the same course, say a botany course, how we ensure that broadly the quality of the courses done in all the colleges are equally good. So we recommend, at least I recommend, preparing a lessons plan for the course. I call it pedagogically aligned executable lesson plans, because very important we choose the right pedagogy in ensuring the course students are engaged in the sequence of learning activities, assessment activities, and so on. The challenge is who is going to design the PELP, or I'm going to call it PELP, so for short. So the pedagogical, emphasize the word executable, because the activities stipulated in this have to be done by the teacher in some parts, the students in some parts, and both of them using certain online resources as well as maybe physical resources like laboratory or other things. So in a sense, the lesson plan has to stipulate what is to be used as the best in what point. Can we go to the next? So for this only, I am recommending a methodology which I stated in the lecture title, Technology Augmented Learning and Course Management. So I'm not talking merely e-content, but where will the e-content fit into the course? That has to be stipulated. My suggestion is, if a university like Kerala University or whatever university, now you have the technical university and so on, the board of studies is the key, because we need a formal approach to do all this, so that these methodologies have certain academic validity. Okay, every university operates through academic council and board of studies. The board of studies is the one that stipulates the curriculum. That is the curriculum adopted in the colleges under the affiliated university. So the board of studies, now I say, just like in NPTEL, we invited the best expert teachers available in the courses who have slogged 10, 20 years teaching the course to give us the lectures. Like that, the board of studies set up course experts group. These are among the more experienced teachers available under the university, in the colleges, and so on. So we develop such people, groups, maybe we don't need more than 3 members in that group. I would even recommend that those students who have done the course extremely well, very bright students, who have done the course, please make them a member of this course. They will bring a beautiful perspective from the learner's point of view in designing the PELP. Okay, so that is this course expert group is the one that designs the PELP. Then it is released like a software release. It's a course version release, and this version is published in the open by the university, inviting bloggers, comments, etc. from others within a certain time. Then conduct a teachers workshop, and more important is give proficiency certification of teachers by the university, by these course experts in using this methodology, and they are capable of teaching this in the colleges. This way we can bridge the problem of the teacher who have to be equipped in teaching this course, and also we will know what kind of resources must work online in a reliable manner. For example, if tomorrow you want to modernize botany course with data sciences, because botany has a huge data science base, geographic information base, and so on, and that has to be brought into the syllabus to modernize the botany curriculum. We can do it using this. So what I am talking is not e-content. I am showing how to modernize the courses that we are running in alignment with modern times in any subject. It may be law, it may be zoology, botany, or of course regular sciences, commerce, engineering, and so on, medical, and so on. So the PELP designed by the course expert on recommendation of the Board of Studies is submitted to the academic council after certain verification process, so that now it becomes a formal component of the university in supporting the course. This will also enable the university to understand what kind of resources, online resources support they need. If certain software has to be worked out, or a virtual reality example has to be recommended, and so on. All these things can happen in this augmented reality, they say, but how to equip the colleges. So all these are possible if we do that, this exercise of PELP. So on top of curriculum, we need these executable lesson plans. Okay. So what I feel that any organization, ideally an affiliating university, should set up a center for digital learning. Okay, instead of having controller of exam and all the time suffering and conducting the exams and correction work and so on, this time that we bring teachers into the center of digital learning, or I just call it CDL. Maybe Marthoma can establish itself to boost the quality of their teachers in doing this, so that they get the necessary training. Also, we have to IT enable our councils. For example, I was part of the IT committee under the Higher Education Council, under the earlier vice chairman, TP Srinivasan. And I had submitted a report there under the IT committee report. The IT committee report is downloadable. My entire section is appended in that particular report. Please read that. It tells you what are the parameters to understand quality of education. Unfortunately, after our committee submitted, nothing much action has been taken, to my knowledge at least, in further how to go about. They wanted to set up like IT at school and IT at colleges. That was the objective of this, but it has not happened yet. I'm saying instead of IT at colleges, call it Center for Digital Learning. That's the only difference. Okay. So Marthoma may establish this center, provide the education cloud support and IT services. This will also reduce the cost of IT in the colleges, because most of the things are going to happen over the cloud. You can borrow a Red Hat cloud. I would recommend it because it's very easily conforming to open source. And I am also proud to say the chairman, the present chairman and chief executive officer of IBM Red Hat, the IBM Global, happens to be my former student from IIT Kanpur, Dr. Arvind Krishna. He is the one in charge. So I can talk to him and make sure these are provided at concessional rates. Okay. So having my students in several of these leading IT across the world now. Okay. So let us do that. So with the support of Center for the CDL, the PELP is used to set up this Talcom for that course. So Talcom has to be shaped the course management because it is technology augmented learning and course management is specific to each course as stated in the in the JEG project proposal. I had written it for Jharkhand Education Grid, which was partly based on the Kerala Education Grid I initiated in 2003, 2006, 5, but unfortunately it got closed down, both due to bureaucracy and lack of adequate interest in the on the part of the universities. But it did quite a good job. We trained over 1,000 teachers at that time when the when mobile was not even that much available. Okay, next slide. So the Jharkhand Education Grid, which I am saying, instead we can talk about Kerala Education Grid or our Center for Digital Learning. It uses Talcom, modernizes and transforms the affiliating university. Okay. Now look at it. 80% of a university energy. You go to, I have been academic council member of Cochin University and some board of studies in Kerala University and so on. I find that most of the energy is wasted in non-academic functions. How to conduct the exam, how to address grievances and so on. But instead, let us come to this. Talcom allows us to address how the course will be conducted. So modernize the curriculum, add recommended digital content from open education resources, lesson plan for each course with pedagogy and learning engagement of students, and support teachers in colleges as they run the course. So if in tomorrow's lecture I have to do a demo, I can get an immediate background from the course expert group appointed by the affiliating university on how to conduct this demo. So the teacher is never without help in such a system. We show how we can set up our education cloud. That's our next goal. Next one. Next slide. Yeah. This is a broad view of what I call as Talcom. Talcom, VLE stands for Virtual Learning Environment. Supported. It's a support for each course. First thing is a university or maybe a higher education council like your Thoma appoints a course expert group who know, but I'm talking about one particular course. It may be physical chemistry or some course like that. Then this course expert use the open education resource. This is the open cloud, open this thing. You can also add to your own video lectures, etc. into this. Okay, put that, take whatever is relevant, and then first they make course design and lesson plan development. LP stands for lesson plan development. So that this is the cycle they undergo, and they generate the PELP, the executable lesson plan, and they then plant it over a university cloud. So the university runs a common cloud for all its colleges. That makes the job much easier for the colleges. Okay. Then once these lesson plans are planted, we also have an LMS, mostly Moodle or something. By using this lesson plan, we configure the course in the Moodle, and this Moodle is exclusively used for teachers in the different colleges who are teaching the same course. So if there are 40 colleges teaching the course, all the 40 teachers are registered in the LMS to get guidance from the course experts who are nominated by the council. This way the core teachers all get full support throughout the conduct of this particular course. The lesson plan will also have a broad calendar. In this week, complete this part. The third week, do this. In the fourth week, do this kind of assessment or certain term paper engagement or whatever that you want to do. That has to be spelled out in detail. Then each college uses its own learning management system and their teachers console and their student database, class database to conduct the course for the students. This is essential. So each teacher, maybe they have 40 students in this course, they can pay personal attention through the LMS. LMS has a lot of facilities. Again, a thorough exposure is needed by the teachers, no matter what. So, and most of the time, they use it rather mechanically without imagination. LMS has far more features to provide personal attention to every student. In addition, collaborative environment for blogging and so on. So all these students also have access to the common cloud that can be a common blog area that can be run by the university under the course. This requires university managing adequate IT capabilities. That is this university education cloud. That support should come from the Center for Digital Learning. So students, teachers anywhere across the state who are under the course, they can in the various colleges, they all have both a personalized space in the college learning management and also a collaborative space in the in the university learning management, okay, or in the university portal. So this way you get the best of possible environment. You need to, ultimately learning takes place in an environment, whether you use classroom activities, whether you use online or you use assessment tools, whatever it is, it takes place in an environment. And it's very important to promote such kind of engagement activities which allow students to collaborate, because students don't learn by studying for exams only. They also learn by even cutting jokes on the teachers, or by trying to design something together as a team, or maybe in some they do a collaborative project of three students each. And this, all these are possible in this kind of engagement. How that has to be done has to be designed by the course experts, with of course inputs from the teachers. So this is a complete system in many ways. It has to come in one form or the other tomorrow. Better to start it today. And to support the IT needs of all this, I need one Center for Digital Learning. Ideally, the IIITMK should take it up, because I was grooming IIITMK to do this kind of things. And that was under the education grid. And it can easily be revived, because they have very talented IT people and various people who understand. Let us keep this in mind. There are 3 cycles here. One is the lesson plan development cycle. The second is course support cycle of the experts supporting the teachers in each college. And third cycle is each teacher in the college managing his or her class within the college using its own IT system. So there are 3 IT ecosystems in this, plus the overall IT required to support the technology base for this. Okay, so that's the background of this. Next one. So let us look at these 3 life cycles. First is course design and lesson plan development. So the Board of Studies nominate 3 to 5 member course expert. They prepare the PELP, required IT support, just closed group, working group, and collaboration support. So you can need a collaboration space, closed group work. There is a software called eGroup where I know Pradeep in IIITMK can actually help establish this. Registered this space. So within this, they manage, because when you prepare anything like this, for example, as an IIT Kanpur faculty, I used to be engaged in setting up GATE exam papers. We need a lot of materials in setting up exams, and one professor from each IIT will come. In those days, only 7 IITs were there. And we used to work under one of the IITs in charge of the subject to set up the GATE exam paper. It's a lot of work. Similar group work can be done to develop the lesson plans. And then we have a GitHub. GitHub is some online tool available to post the finalized lesson plans and the evolution towards it. This allows year after year after year, you can evolve the lesson plan with version management. This year version 1.3, next year version 1.5, third year total curriculum change to version 2, and so on. That has to be managed. So in some sense, the very rich experience India has in managing software development can be brought into course development and lesson plan development using tools like GitHub, which is available for free. Okay. Then of course they use the Moodle LMS, and then colleges need an ERP. In Kerala, Fedina is very widely used, and I will also highly recommend this for using this. The free version of the Fedina is enough. You can buy optional things, but they are not central to the academics. Next one, next slide. Okay. This part 2 cycle, teacher support by the university. The university uses an LMS for the teachers and not for students. Okay. So that if 30-40 college teachers are doing, they take support with the course expert group in the Moodle, so that the course experts can actually help the teachers in saying, okay, why don't you take this kind of demonstration, presentation, or online activity, like a software activity or visualization activity and so on. That can be supported. Then the course expert group conduct the teacher orientation and training using this model. So this also becomes a concurrent teachers training tool. In 2006, 5 or 6, I wrote a paper on concurrent teachers training, how it can be managed in a university environment. It got published, that's all, but we need universities to change their culture. The problem is more of culture than of capability. Okay, the GitHub node to post this approved lesson plan, which has passed through academic council and so on. Then the support is provided by course expert group. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, the third cycle is class management life cycle, which is done in the college. So each teacher in the college uses one's own Moodle for taking the class, managing the class. This is a necessity because in a Moodle-like platform, you can bring in recommended online e-learning content, e-content, or e-resources of different kinds, like virtual laboratories and other online assessment activities. All those things can be brought into the through a Moodle. Okay, but Moodle is free, open source. It's just like Linux, like industry policy. It's open. Okay, so the course classes are conducted. I'm sure some of your colleges may already be using Moodle. PLP document also links to e-resources. So across the various colleges, they'll be using exactly the same e-resources. Okay, colleges use their own ERP with student database to produce to populate the course from the FEDENA platform or some other platform, and then put it in the class registration database. Okay, FEDENA ERP system for the Jharkhand. I'm just thinking that this is a slightly different topic. Basically, you need an ERP system for the college. We recommend FEDENA by default because it is popular in Kerala. Okay, next one. Now, when we talk about lesson plan and pedagogy is very popular understanding of pedagogy is given under what is called the Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom was chairman of the committee appointed by Eisenhower in 19. Okay. Yeah.
Doubts to ask me. ഈ ടെക്സ്റ്റിലെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് പഠിക്കുക എന്നുള്ള ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ്. ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ പഴയ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ നോക്കുന്നത് നല്ലതാണ്, പക്ഷെ ടെക്സ്റ്റിലെ
Professor, can you just ask in English? Professor, can you just
ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ആയിരിക്കും കൂടുതലായിട്ട് വരുന്നത്.
The voice is not very clear. I'll just complete the presentation. We'll take it up in due time. Okay. So the point is there are 6 levels or 6 topics. Previous slide. It has slipped. Hello. Can you go?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
Sir, it's audible, sir, audible.
Previous slide I want. I think the slide got slipped earlier. Yeah, right. So I was in this. So depending on the same topic, at what level are we teaching? Basic remembering, understanding, we do it through the college exam route and that kind of thing. But how to apply this idea in various contexts? What kind of analysis required and what kind of analyzing tools we have to require? Can we use this, what is taught in the class, to judge, evaluate in a real world context? Or can you be creating, innovating, and so on, design, such kind of thing? Depending on what level you will have to apply, accordingly the lesson has to be designed. Everything cannot be paper designed, and so you can choose the right level. And I'll talk about Bloom's taxonomy, I hope, in a later course on how it is done. It is basically leads you to the concept of instruction design. Once you know how to do the instruction design, choosing the right level in the lesson, we can go further. Next one. Yeah, next one. The basics about quality of education again. First principle I have already covered in some sense, outcome-based education, at least given an exposure. Basically, each course has clearly expressed course objectives and instructional objectives. Okay, and in each lesson, that is overall course has an objective. It's broken into say half a dozen lessons. Each may be conducted over a week or 10 days or something. And each lesson has clearly laid out instructional objectives. The most important thing is any objective statement should not be saying that you will understand this, you will be able to read this. There should be a measurable outcome. This is the most difficult part in designing a lesson plan. How to design activities with measurable outcomes through assessments. Well-trained teachers are central in class management. So they can share it with fresh teachers, less experienced teachers. On completion of the course, the student should achieve them and demonstrably exhibit the competencies and skills. Then it is called outcome-based education. So right pedagogy chosen by the course expert group in shaping this is vital in the success of integrating e-content into the teaching learning activities. Next one. Next one. Yeah. The second principle I had already mentioned is called graduate attribute profile. It is stipulated, as I mentioned, in the Washington Accord. Basically, it tells you the various activities a student should undergo, or guides you to shape that over a period of the 3-year degree program or 4-year degree program. Achieve the desirable graduate attributes. I'll just give a short exposure to what are these graduate attributes. Next one. Next one. Yeah. Here I'm just actually there are some 13 different attributes put in the Washington Accord. You can download it in the web. First is you must have a mastery of knowledge of the subjects with capacity for comprehension of conceptual models in the subject. Capacity for designing, developing solution to real world problems. This is overall degree program objective. Capacity to model real world problems in apply and use of modern tools. You may be using software tools, other tools, methodologies, AI, and so on. That students should become competent in it. And then professional character, ethics, capacity for individual and teamwork. It's very built into the course graduate attribute profile. Behave ethically and in legally correct ways with sensitivity to societal and cultural issues. Project management and finance related skills. All these skills are expected at the end of a 4-year graduate program. So one must look at what kind of course. Of course, we have courses under humanities. In IIT Kanpur, we have courses under humanities. Even philosophy is taught. And then you have sciences, you have languages, in addition to that basic engineering, mathematics, and so on. Okay, so that completes a kind of profile of some capability exposure in all these attributes. The third is a very difficult, I would love to spend a complete lecture on this, what is called organizational learning contract. A student entering in a college actually enters into a learning contract by the end of a course or by the end of the entire program, that the student is guaranteed to achieve these program objectives or course objectives. That is how this guarantee is provided, is called the learning contract. It was initiated by Paul Goodman, who was also a founder of NPTEL and a Carnegie Mellon University professor. He wrote this title. He is unfortunately no more. He passed away a few years ago. So every student informed in each course, what are you learning? Why are you learning? A particular lesson also may say, when are you learning? How you will learn? And so on. Okay. There are certain courses like teamwork. Now, it won't be fitting in normally in a course, but you can have special engagement of students in extracurricular activities to produce teamwork. Students do it in a natural way in their own students' festivals and so on, but you can make it more formal. So it helps. YLC helps the learning contract. How PLP will guide the course conduct, while GAP helps in the sequence of courses leading to a degree. These two are partly interdependent. Okay, next one. So these are
Wilson, sir.
partly.
Wilson, sir. The section need to be winded up in 5 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. Is it possible for you to?
Yeah, I'm going to finish it in 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm giving you a model of the various pedagogies, how they can fit it. Here, what the student picks up, he is given the instructional objectives. The instruction delivery comes in many ways. It may be class lecture, it may be NPTEL video lecture, it may be textbook content, online or education resource, and then you have a set of online and offline learning activities. This is given in the lesson, and then you have an online self-test. Self-test is a very important thing. A student should be able to test oneself to see the concept has been achieved, and then it provides a feedback on to the student how well they are comfortable in each lesson. All these have to be helpful, and then of course there are certain midterm, continuous assessment, there is summative assessment, and then you get the degree award. That is the right side of it. But this feedback driven path is critical for quality education. Our lesson plans will have to incorporate that. Next one. We'll finish it off. Okay. This is the kind of infrastructure seen from the students and teachers side. At the center is students and teachers, the class management. So students, of course, use it in their IT devices. The board of studies, course expert group, they shape the lesson plans. These are put in the cloud. And there is a technology support, I call it Center for Digital Learning and Cloud Services. So all these are needed to coherently manage the class of tomorrow. Okay, it's not just leave it to one college alone. Okay, next. These are the infrastructure needed in a college. The class management system like Vedina, there is a ERP. Here is the teacher's console, which is coming from the Moodle itself, and then of course what the university provides through the Telecom Education Cloud and so on, that is reaching. So it is not much from the college point of view, but overall management of Telecom requires an education cloud well managed under the university. Next one. Is just by proposal, IIITMK Kerala Digital University should open an advanced Kerala Center for Digital Learning with a variety of things like various cloud network. It has to have core postgraduate program for education and research and development in the area and so on. I just leave it because it's a dream I was chasing at that time, but it was even reports were given to Kerala government, but they still don't have yet to appreciate all this. But it will come one day anyway, in some form or the other. Okay, next one. Okay, this is a summary. Modern university college education system is primary objective of the Center for Digital Learning. Telecom provides collaborative framework for course design, course conduct in the university, and its classes management in the colleges seamlessly. And then Center for Digital Learning provides the education cloud and IT support. Various organizations can think of supporting. We can start with something small within our capabilities and then go ahead. Telecom integrates various resources, open education, virtual labs, etc., into the lesson activities with capacity for personal attention to monitor every student, even in large classes. Okay, so the CDL has to be developed as an inter-university center. This is very critical. Next one. That is it. By the end of this lecture, just an imagination. Here is a quotation from Raghurai, the great photographer journalist. It says, "For me, life itself is energy. Anything that is not charged with emotion is plain information. It is emotion and energy that gives you new awareness and new experience." How to provide this emotion and energy in the student to appreciate and master the subject? That is the real challenge in life. Okay, that's my next one is the last slide. Thank you. That is, team means together everyone achieves more. It's a very beautiful collaboration possible. Please feel free to ask me not only following this lecture on my email or WhatsApp or whatever. Let me see how much I can help you. Okay, but I have a dream. I'll still chase it. That's it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Srivasan, sir, for giving us bird's eye view on a rather elaborate topic and gave us some insight into the area of technology, augmented learning, and the course management. So we are running short of time, so we can allow only just one question, and the questions you can email the email that is given in the chat box. We can just have a one interaction section. One question can be allowed. Please.
Yes, Suresh sir, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Dr. Praveen Sagalia, yeah.
Okay, sir, you were mentioning about technology augmented learning and that it will modernize and transform the affiliating university. Sir, my question is, when technology is augmenting teaching, what is the validity of a physical classroom or a physical teacher? And together with that, I would to add one more thing. And you were mentioning about competency and skills as course-based outcomes. And if a student is developing competency and skill or skills, and suppose it is not in tune with the ongoing trends or national building requirements, then how can we say that it is outcome-based education? That is my question.
A course, when it is offered, whether it's by a college or under a university, states its own course outcomes. Our focus is to deliver those course outcomes. We need not consider about the extraneous thing, because if the extraneous things come, again, the university board of studies concerned to, or any board of studies concerned to take up that issue. Okay. On the other hand, course management is the central to that. In that, the teacher's role is actually central, because you may be aware of flipped class model, where students take the routine lecture, etc., in the class, in the residence or home, and teacher engages in the learning activities like demonstration, problem solving, etc., so that the learning is reinforced. So the teacher is very central to this thing. That is how you enhance the quality of education. India's problem had been, we have been coaching students how to answer university questions, and the university in turn tortures itself as well as teachers and the students only by conducting some patterned exam year after year after year, and not really helping them to learn. So students, ultimately students study for what they are assessed, and that assessment should have a weight. Okay, and if the assessment is only to achieve marks in the exam, obviously it is not getting to learn. It is rather it dilutes the learning. There are many things which requires a competent teacher. Now you see, this teacher is no longer alone. You can always consult an expert teacher. He or she can consult an expert teacher in this Talcom network to help.
Thank you, Suresh. Good afternoon, everybody. They say that gratitude is the right attitude. On behalf of Thoma Higher Education Council and the organizing team, it is my honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Almighty God for making today's program, as well as this session, a resounding success. Next, I would like to thank our chief guest, Professor K.R. Srivatsan, professor at Odisha Open University, for not only sparing his valuable time, but more importantly, for delivering an excellent talk on a very relevant topic, e-content design and delivery. In the aftermath of COVID pandemic, I think we need to realize that teachers need to integrate technology seamlessly into the curriculum instead of viewing it as an add-on, an afterthought, or an event. Joel Gardner once said, "The most effective, successful professionals are constantly learning. They take time to apply what they have learned, and they continuously work to improve themselves." I am sure that today's talk will be beneficial for all attendees, most of whom are faculties in various institutes across the country. On the behalf of the organizing committee, I thank you, sir, for delivering an informative talk and for all your advice and suggestions for augmenting the quality of education we provide, especially setting up CDL. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Up next, I would like to thank the Secretary, Thoma Higher Education Council, Dr. Alex Matthew, for his support and guidance. Thank you, sir, for your supervision and guidance. Next, I would like to express my gratitude to the principal of St. Thomas College, Dr. Roy George, and the principals and heads of various institutes and colleges under the
system to measure. Whereas in a student-centric approach, you are trying to somehow quantitatively and qualitatively understand how is the learning and teaching happening within that course. So another major difference that you see is like in a teacher-centric education, you have course objectives. Course objectives are typically those things that you want the student to you have a set of topics that you want to teach, and there are a set of activities that you are planning, and it's very much teaching focused. So you're saying, okay, the student would need to be thorough with these kind of subjects. And that is fully driven by the teacher through that course objectives. So the learning target itself is defined by the course objective. Whereas in a student-centric approach, the learning target is really looked through the outcomes. So there may be assessment, there may be some activities that are actually measurable. So when we say outcomes, these outcomes should be something very exact, something that people should be able to relate back to the assignments or homeworks or tasks that the student has done, and be able to map it. Another important thing is the independent time that the student has spent into learning. This is not really articulated in a teacher-centric education, whereas this is very much part of the course design strategies that one would employ in a student-centric learning. And again, teacher-centric entered education, most of the time you don't do any mapping. You leave that exercise completely out of the picture, whereas in a student-centric, you're really looking at mapping. It's very much necessary that you do all the different kind of mapping that are required of outcomes at various levels or course objectives at various levels. So we'll see what these things are. So to simplify, in a course, you have three different things. One is learning outcomes, which basically tells what students should be able to do. There are learning activities, which simply tells how they will how they learn to do it. And there are assessments and how well you know they can do it. So basically three different aspects which are interrelated. So learning outcomes can be something that should be connected to the assessment as well as your learning activity. Likewise, the learning activity should be connected to your assessments and learning outcomes, and the assessment should be connected to learning outcomes and learning activities. So they're very much interdependent. So the question is, why do we need learning outcomes? The foremost thing is it brings a lot of clarity, precision, and transparency when it comes to designing a curriculum, teaching practice, or the assessments that you're planning. It brings a lot of clarity and precision. What happens is if you design a very good set of learning outcomes, the expectation of that course will be much more clearer to a student. And this usually, when you remove a lot of confusion out of that outcomes, the student satisfaction also usually improves because they know exactly what is expected out of the course. And even like including, say you are running an assessment and saying like in this assessment is meant for doing this particular outcome, or you are like looking at these set of outcomes when the student answers these set of questions, the students are also much more clearer like what they are being assessed for, and they can prepare their assignments or prepare their task accordingly to satisfy those outcomes. Another important thing is the curriculum alignment. And the curriculum alignment usually involves like organizing the curriculum in a very structured way, which should include typically aims. You would have teaching strategies included, learning outcomes, you would have content, course content, like what are the syllabus that you would cover, and assessments. All of them should be a coherent unit in the sense like they should be all connected to each other. They should be very much tied with the student learning. So what are learning outcomes? They are simply statements, a set of statements which basically shows the desired results of learning, so that these statements become measurable as well, and something that is achievable. You don't want to put like statements which are too broad or which are unachievable. These should be something that the student should be able to achieve, and this should be something as a teacher you should be able to evaluate and measure. So overall, like if there are good learning outcomes written for a start, then you will be able to understand like how much learning has occurred in that course. Now, coming down to each of those terms, like for example, aims, they are all different. Aims, objectives, outcomes, they are all different. They're not same. So it's important to define what are aims. So aims are simply like very high level broad sentences which shows you general intention and the desired outcomes of an institution, program, or a course. So you can have like aims for a program, you can have an aims for an institution, you can have aims for a course, aims or goals for a course. And these are like different from learning outcomes. This has certain relation to learning outcome. You can map it, but essentially they are high level to give you a general direction of what kind of teaching and learning should happen. For example, like curriculum and teaching practices aim to link students' learning experiences to the world graduates will confront. So this is like an aim, overall very high level aim. Now to achieve this aim, you can decide within a program set of program learning outcomes or student learning outcomes can be designed. You can also come up with program objectives which will align to those. Now, learning objectives, whenever we use a term objective, this is different from outcome. Learning objectives in general, like, it is a teacher's intention for the learners, such as what student will be taught during the course or a program. The learning objectives really reflect on what teachers do. So obviously, it is important to have like learning objectives as well. So for example, a statement of learning objective could be something like this. Students will be taught the conceptual and theoretical tools used in reasoning and problem solving, such as statistics, probability, logic, and decision theory. So here you can see the keyword is taught, that it's still like student learning, but the action that is happening here is from the teacher's perspective of what kind of like learning should happen, and the teacher's point of view is, teacher's intention is actually shown there. Then we have learning outcomes, which is very much focused at student. So here, any kind of learning outcome, whether the learning outcome is written at a course level or it is written at a program level, what is intended here is what a student will be able to do or demonstrate at the completion of certain sequence of learning. Now that sequence of learning can be course, which would have several modules in it, or it can be a set of several courses put together forming a program. So essentially, when you look at learning outcomes, it's mainly concerned with achievements of the learner and less with intention of the teacher. Now, this is a very important thing to note here, because the focus in the previous one, or the learning objective, was that the focus was on the teacher's intention, whereas like in the learning outcome, it's no longer the teacher's intention, it is more about achievement of the learner. So the learning outcomes inform the student of what is expected of them in terms of performance to achieve certain grades and credits. So an example of a learning outcome, at the end of the course, students will be able to demonstrate the ability to use mathematical and statistical techniques relevant to the business subjects taught. So here you can see there is some structure to it, which we look at, how you write a learning outcome. But then you can see that it's very precise as of what is expected from the student. So the student would need to demonstrate. It's a verb. It's a very important verb here, which defines this. Like demonstrate the ability to use mathematical and statistical technique. Now you can always like come up with a course where you have a learning outcome, and then you can think about, when you're teaching this, you would think about, okay, am I covering this learning outcome when I'm teaching this particular module? Am I covering this learning outcome? when I'm giving an assignment, a quiz or a test, is these learning outcomes covered? So then you can do a mapping to see like, are all, if you define like 5 or 10 learning outcomes, are these learning outcomes covered throughout the study in terms of assessment, in terms of course delivery, in terms of activities? Are these all linked to the learning outcomes? That brings in a lot of clarity in the teaching and learning process. So program educational objectives are again like focused at objective. These are broader statements that describe the career and professional accomplishment that the program is preparing the graduates to achieve. Now, it is, you can see they are still at a higher level. They are not going down to specific like outcomes, but they are kind of setting up certain intentions of the program that is focused on the professional or career accomplishment that the student is being prepared for. And in fact, like there are 4 different aspects of it that is making it different from a program or a course specific like outcomes. One is the degree of specificity, in the sense like they are very broad, and they should not be very specific and narrow like a learning outcome. Learning outcomes are very narrow and focused, so that shouldn't be the case. So in a program educational objective, especially when you see it somewhere, they should be broad enough to cover a wide range of things. Then role of constituents is also very important. So it would look at like what is that this particular objective meaning for the constituents or like the stakeholders, for example, employees or alumni or faculty, or even determining like in success what is required with respect to others who are involved, not the student itself. So the role of constituents are very important when it comes to writing an educational objective. Another aspect is purpose of the assessment. The important thing, another important thing would be, is it relevant? The relevance of the profession. When the student goes through this educational objective, is it something that is relevant to the program and to their profession that is being built? And the third part is like the data collection. So data collection related to educational objectives usually are in a longer cycle. So once in 2 years or 3 years, you would collect the information related to that educational objective to see, are these educational objectives meaningfully obtained? Whereas learning outcomes, you do it like every semester, probably every time when you run a course, you would collect that information, you validate that information, you'll work on improving that learning and teaching based on what you get there. Whereas program learning educational objective takes a bit more longer time to really see that whether that impact has happened, because you need to get feedback from the constituents, or you want to see how whether these assessments have worked, or the purpose of the assessment has worked, and so on and so forth. And program outcomes are related to the program. It's a learning outcomes itself, but then this is with higher level overall for all the various courses that the student has taken. Put together, you form the program, and for this entirety of the program, whether these you can come up with like a set of statements that are measurable as outcomes for the entire program. So it's a question of like scope that you are looking at, the scope of the learning outcomes that you have at the program level versus the that you have at the course level. And program outcomes should again look at vision, purpose, and goals of the program. And in fact, like this should be mapped to the institutional level objectives as well, because then you would be able to decide what kind of students you want to graduate. So for example, some programs would want to develop like researchers. Some programs would want to develop people specifically for industry or specific set of industries. So in those cases, is it part of the institutional strategy that you're building something like that? And are these something that you can measure back and take feedback? Are we achieving that institutional goals and strategies? So that is something that can be linked at a program outcome. So generally speaking, objective versus outcome, if you look at, objectives are rather intended result or consequence of instruction, curricula, program, or activity. Objectives are focused on specific type of performance that the students are expected. And it's more often written in the form of teacher's intention, whereas like outcomes are achieved as a result or consequence of what was learned. And again, it is student centered. So I think many people would have already talked about Bloom's taxonomy, and you might be also familiar with. So I'll just quickly brief it so that like to set the context of these. So earlier, the Bloom's taxonomy used to be like this. You would have like a remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create, and each one of those has certain cognitive level that you would set in. From an educational point of view, you can simply say remember means recalling fact or basic concept, or understand means explain idea. And for helping define these levels, over the years, like people looked at it more carefully, defining various verbs. And these verbs are used in constructing. It will be quite useful in constructing like learning outcomes that are more or less measurable. So for example, define, duplicate, list, memorize, they are very specific as of like what actions are intended out of it. Or for example, classify, describe, they are very clear, this is something that you can measure. And if you try to connect those two activities, many ways you can create like a plan like this. So you have define and list, remember level. How can you translate it to an activity? Maybe through a video, maybe through examples, maybe through illustrations, analogies. Through a lecture, you can help identify or define or list. Likewise, going further at a higher levels, you can see as in when you go to a higher level, the complexity also increases. The kind of task that people would be required to do, that increases. So create, for example, here, constructing or designing or creating or develop, formulate, hypothesize. So in this case, like, take an example of a project, and in a project, you might be doing many of these things. So it becomes kind of like a high level activity. So like that, for each of these levels, one can come up with various, activities, and link those activities to specific set of verbs. So in this case, like, okay, even something like presentation. Now, presentation can check whether the person is able to summarize well. But the same presentation can be used for some other task as well, like, for example, evaluating, because in the presentation, one may be showing a simulation. So when someone shows during presentation a simulation, then obviously it should be looked at a higher level compared to if someone is just illustrating like what they understood about that concept or about that particular content. So a modified version, like, these days, what people often use is this one. So there is some change in terminologies that are used. Like, for example, instead of remembering, like, you see it as knowledge, So can the student recall or remember the information? So that is redefined as knowledge. Understanding is redefined as comprehension. Because many a times what happened is like when people started to use this is quite useful, like these changes are very useful in the sense that when people see understanding and when they write the learning outcomes starting with say understand, the problem is that understand is very difficult to measure, so that makes it hard. So that's why like this transition has helped quite a bit in terms of bringing in more clarity in the measurement. So for each one of them, these set of like verbs that you see here, that they are quite useful and helpful in actually writing. So these verbs also, when we think about it, all these higher level verbs can be used for demonstrating critical thinking. And critical thinking is something that is seen as an important skill for the 21st century. So more and more programs, you would see that analysis, synthesis, and evaluation related skills are increasing compared to what it was like 10 years back. Simply because the job market and many other things are demanding that the student becomes more critical thinkers. So it means like the course curriculum also would have to slowly shift towards that. So you would, of course, you would need like knowledge, comprehension, application, and all those things. But you may be also looking at like more important critical thinking. So from an assessment point of view, you can actually like map this from many of these verbs can be tied up to the assessment, and this can be again tied up to the questions that you would generate. So for example, creating means like your idea is you are generating new ideas or products or ways of viewing things. So how do we test this? Like, you can check it, like, come up with a question. Can you design something? So design becomes like an important verb here, process verb, which will help you streamline or set the level of that question. So if you say like, can you create? Then again, it is going towards like the level of taxonomy is create a high level. Similar to that, you're saying what are the pros and cons? Pros and cons means like you're trying to compare, and compare is a process verb in the evaluation. So that way you can actually formulate and see what level is your questioning mapping to in the Bloom's taxonomy. And this is one way to map your, when you are practically like trying to formulate the questions, you can set it up such that you can bring in various levels of Bloom's taxonomy itself like into your questioning straight away. And it becomes easier in that case to relatively like position the difficulty of the course or level of the course. When it's a first year course, you might want to focus more on remembering or understanding level, and maybe going towards the end of the program, you want to focus on evaluation, evaluating, creating. So it's not that like every course would have same type of questions. You would think about how to change the questions from one first year to the second year to third year. You could formulate the questions such that it would check like various levels of cognitive ability. So when it comes to writing the outcomes, we need to be as clear as possible. Usually you start with a sentence on completion of the course or a subject or a program, and the student should be able to. It's very important to note, student should be able to. It's student-centered. And then you would use certain verbs from the Bloom's taxonomy to define the level. So any of these verbs you could use to define that level. So you can clearly look at a particular course, first year course. Should that be remembering and understanding that you want to focus on? Then you can put those verbs in. Or if you want to like in the third year or fourth year courses, you want to look at more high-level skills, then you can come up with outcomes matching these particular verbs. Maybe combine or compose or construct these kind of verbs. So that would be the structure, and then you follow it with an activity. For example, something like this. You can see a construct, which would be an action verb. Then you would have like a content or a topic to be learned, and then a context to place it in a proper disciplinary context. So specific to that particular subject or program. So just to give an example, what can be a good and bad. So this is a very poorly written learning outcome. So here you can see the student should know the historically important systems of psychology. Now, why this is poor is like the term know is not clear, right? You cannot measure that. Are they supposed to know everything about them or just names? So should the students be able to recognize the names, recite the central idea, or criticize the assumption? So it is very difficult to measure this. A better way to write this is that you could say a bit more, give a bit more context. So let's say the student should know the psychoanalytic or Gestalt, behaviorist, humanistic, and cognitive approaches to psychology. Now, this is slightly better in the sense that you're telling what they should know. But the problem here again is that it derails from exactly what they should know about each of these theories, or how deeply they should understand whatever it is that they should understand. So you could make it even better and say you should be able to recognize. You can see the word know is now replaced with recognize and articulate. So these are action verbs which makes it much more precise, saying, okay, if the student is able to recognize and articulate the assumptions, the central ideas, and form a dominant criticism of that topic, then it is something that you can measure with a set of questions which would exactly look at this. So that way, such a learning outcome will be more appropriate compared to having something like this, which are difficult to measure. So if you look at some examples of various levels, so say this is research degree learning outcomes. Upon the completion of the degree, the candidate will be able to demonstrate. So you can see demonstrate is a key word, verb that is being used. And another is demonstrate. Here you develop, exhibit. You can see each one of those verbs are used, and then it's going ahead with saying what they are supposed to demonstrate. So they're demonstrating critical understanding, mastery of architectural and design theories, or demonstrate independent research methodologies at an advanced level, develop and express their own design positions in an effective and lucid manner. So you can see each one of them are at a higher level here, because demonstrate, develop, exhibit, they are at higher level. And obviously, because it's a research higher degree, you would place those verbs you will use those verbs which are at higher level. If you go to graduate or master's level, you would see it is going a slightly lower cognitive level, where you're using analyze or apply or identify or communicate. So such verbs are being used there. So that you are setting still those are measurable, but the cognitive levels are now slightly lower. And the same thing with undergraduate. You can see further you're going down in the cognitive level, but you also have a mix of various levels here. You can see here, this may be something like a second year or third year course, so where you would have a mix of things. And if it's a new topic which doesn't have a prerequisite, then you might have to always have a knowledge build up. So in that case, you would need a define, which would check the knowledge at a lower level. And then demonstrate is going at a higher level. You can see using is application. Analyze is another, critically evaluating something. So you can see how it can be now seen to write up such like outcomes. So broadly put, like, we would have like a set of program outcomes, course outcomes, course assessments, and other indirect like assessments. So all of them linked to the course outcomes. And indirect assessments are altogether a different topic, because so there are certain courses where you would need it, something like internships, or if someone is doing, say, a mini project and things like this, such indirect assessments would be required, where it may be someone writing a reference letter or something like that. And you would also have direct course assessments, which would include like homework, projects, quizzes. But the idea is like all these assessments and things like this, they should be related to these course learning outcomes, which are, or program learning outcomes, which should be measurable. And to help create like that mapping with the assessment, you can see something like this. So there are different ways of mapping. So this square box here is your assessments, and the rhombus here is like learning outcomes. So if you see, there is one-to-one possibility. Like each outcome, each assessment is specifically looking at only one outcome. Or you can have one-to-many, where one assessment looks at various outcomes. Or you have like many of the assessments looking at one outcome. Or you can have many to many possibility. Now, which one is better depends on what you want to do with the course. But if you look at through, minimum risk would be like having something like a function onto all many course, where you would have many of these assessments looking at one outcome, and several of those getting repeated. So here, the coverage will be larger, high validity and high focus involved when several of the assessments are targeted at one learning outcome. So if you have like 5 learning outcomes, for each of those learning outcomes, you would have like several assessments, not just one assessment covering all the learning outcomes. So many assessments collectively like trying to address the course learning outcome. The need for doing that is simply because like there are a lot of different types of learners in a classroom. So some students may be good at writing an essay, some students may be good at presenting, some students may be good at like writing an exam, some may be good at doing a project. So if you come up with like various different forms of assessments, and each assessment to cover like various set of like learning outcomes, then the strength of
Excuse me,
each
Alexa.
student can be taken in. Yeah.
Alexa, actually our time for the session is almost coming to an
Yeah,
end.
it's almost done.
Please
Almost
okay.
done.
Okay, thank you very much.
So this assessment, you can also give weightage to it, and you can map it to the for each assessment. You can map it and say what are the student learning outcomes that are covered, and you can create like a plan, a teaching plan, which would include like all the assessments and related like which all like learning outcomes and program learning outcomes are covered. You can also put in like specific dates, you can give the weightage and all those things. And when you do this, the advantage will be that later on, if you want to validate and verify, you can do it very quickly. And you can also look at it individual like question level, and you can even measure that. You can see how many students like really achieved those, how many of them actually answered it correctly, and you can come up with like even quantification to it, and say that okay, this much is actually achieved. Same thing you can do with mapping the program learning program outcomes with the course outcomes. So you have broader level of program outcomes defined in the program, and you can see which are like learning outcomes map to or these particular specific set of learning outcomes, are they matching with learning outcomes, program learning outcomes. And you can create like a mapping table which shows those linkages. So something like this, you can create like a table with all the relation, like correlations. You can also have the assessments marked with the course learning outcomes. You can see like which all assessments are taking care of which all course learning outcomes and program learning outcomes. And even you can give a weighting to it rather than saying just like, it meets. You can say how much it meets. Like, for example, it's an introductory level, or is it like a practice level, or is it like a mastering level? So you can give 1, 2, 3 numbers as well. So some of them give 1, 2, 3 numbers just to give a weighting to it. So these are some of the references you can go through it, which should basically give more detail about like how to write it. What will be the good way to write the learning outcome, and how you can go about that. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexa, for your wonderful presentation. And since we have already exceeded time, we will take up 1 or 2 questions. There is one question in the chat box itself. So shall I?
Yeah, I see that. Could you please give the difference between program outcome, program specific outcome? Well, the thing is like the program specific outcome means like that is specific to the program. Like, for example, you might have a master in computer science, and you might have like a specialization in say cybersecurity. Now the master of, or the master in computer science, you would have like a broader definition. All the master programs would have a certain set of broader outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Whereas that specialization would need something very specific in cybersecurity that you're looking at. So you would use that program specific outcome to define your program. The specific, like whatever content that you have, what you want to achieve in the program, that you would bring in the specific. And usually you would not have too many there. You would have maybe 3, or you might have like 4 broad specific outcomes. Whereas like program outcomes, many times accreditation bodies itself many times would define it for you. So you could like just use that. For example, NBA would have like a list of like 12 or 13 outcomes that you could use. ABET would have, like IET would have like different accreditation bodies would already define that. So you could either use that. I mean, it's not that you have to strictly use the same wording, but the idea would be to be inclusive of those ideas. So this 13 or 12 or whatever is there, ideas that are from there, that should be mapped. So that will be part of that accreditation requirement, that your master program or undergraduate program is at the same level as the master program or undergraduate program at any other university in the country, or like across like international benchmarks, they are meeting the same criteria. So whereas the program specific outcome is where you have the flexibility to like fine tune specific to that particular program.
Okay, thank you, sir. So if any participants have question, one more question we will address. If anyone is having question, please unmute your mic and can ask to the resource person.
English
Okay.
or Malayalam, it's fine. Just...
Can I ask a question, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So thank you, Alexa, for the wonderful talk. I just want to know one thing. You have mentioned about the outcomes. Are they fixed or dynamic? Because once we design a syllabus, we fix the outcomes, and the same course, it will be practiced in different way. In IIT, it will be practiced in different manner. In self-financing college, it will be another way. In aided college, another way. The same course.
Yeah.
So is it fixed or dynamic?
So basically, like if you have a course that in universities there is flexibility to change it. Like you can look at at least like 1 or 2 rounds of how effective like the learning outcomes have been, and based on that you have flexibility to change it. Whereas like in affiliated colleges, I think once you fix it, like there is a time period in which like these revisions are done. So usually these are static things. You know, you're deciding the course outcomes ahead of time. So it's part of the curriculum design. So when you design the syllabus, when you are like setting up the overall like structure, you're fixing the outcomes. What flexibility what you could bring in is that even if that outcomes are fixed for a period of time, you can always measure these outcomes. And when you are revising, when it comes to revising the syllabus, at that time you can go about like making a proper judgment on whether these outcomes need to be changed. Because what is important today for the students to achieve may not be same like 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line, because industry might have changed, like the employment like requirements might have changed. So you are maybe looking at different kind of like outcomes to be there. So it is static component, similar to like the similar to defining the objective and other things overall like requirement. And another thing is that if you keep on changing, the issue is that many times whenever you're making change, all these needs to be documented, right? So it becomes like a big effort in terms of really seeing whether teaching and learning has happened. So it's better to always keep the learning outcome for a period of time, observe it, clearly see whether those outcomes have achieved, and if there is some outcomes that needs to be changed, then you have like data to look at to make those changes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, we can't take up more questions. If the participants are having still questions, you can mail to Mathoma Higher Education Commission mail ID. We will wind up the session. Now I invite Ms. Chaitanya Elsa Achankunya, Assistant Professor and Head Department of English, for delivering the vote of thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Anupama ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Alex James, sir, respected webinar organizing team, and my most beloved participants. Just now, we have arrived at the culmination of a session, of an insightful session that has highlighted on what we mean by learning outcomes and how significant they are right from the level of curriculum design to assessment. A proper understanding of the learning outcomes we created with appropriate measurable verbs based on frameworks such as Bloom's taxonomy facilitate teaching learning process to be more efficient and effective and provide clarity and satisfaction both to the learner and the teacher. On behalf of Mathoma Higher Education Commission and all the participants, I express our wholehearted gratitude to Dr. Alex P. James, sir, for providing us clarity on learning outcomes. Thank you, sir. Let me thank Dr. Alex Matthew, sir, the coordinator of the webinar, and the entire organizing team of Mathoma Higher Education Commission for arranging this session for us. I thank all the respected principals and IQAC coordinators who were actively involved in the conception and planning of this webinar. I thank my Mathoma College for Women team, our respected principal, Dr. Suja Mary Burgess, the IQAC coordinator and moderator of this session, Dr. Anupama P., Mr. Jibin Shibusam, who rendered the welcome speech, and all my dear colleagues in the college. I also thank all the participants, the beloved colleagues from all other institutions under Mathoma management. May our good Lord help us to be wonderful human beings and inspiring teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexa. Once again, thank you all, each and every participants. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. If you have questions, you can write to me as well.
Yes. Of course.
Thank you, team from Perumbavoor, for handling this session. We will straight away move to the final session of the day. Over to Team Chenganur, Christian College.
Good afternoon, everybody. Am I heard?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, dear participants. As we move to the last session of the day, we stay focused on our emphasis on outcome-based learning. This being one of the central criteria of assessment of curriculum in our accreditation process. All of us are fairly familiar with what are called program outcomes and course outcomes in our curricula. Can they lead to a deep conceptual understanding, industrial institutional application, development of skills that are in demand, and finally, the development of balanced personalities with an understanding of current societal needs? We have seen a discussion of Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy calls this the development of cognitive, affective, and psychomotor skills on a very in a very broad-based manner. The development of the student personality, what Dr. Saji Gopinath in the morning put forward so rightly as knowing, being, and doing. From the digital scaffold where we stand today, are there better and enhanced means, software features, solutions that address the various realms of our outcome-based curriculum? This is what we are going to see today in our discussion. The session will be led by Dr. Indira Bharadwaj and Mr. Murthy Poppala. Dr. Indira is an academician and Mr. Murthy is a senior product manager of Anubhavam Technologies. It's a cloud-based comprehensive higher education software company. To introduce the speakers, I pass on the baton to Ms. Linchu Elizabeth Samuel, Assistant Professor of the Department of Economics, Christian College, Chengalpattu. She will also be addressing the gathering, giving the welcome address. Over to you, Linchu, ma'am.
Thank you, Shalini teacher. Resource persons of the afternoon, Dr. Indira Bharadwaj, Mr. Murthy Poppala, Dr. Alex K. Samuel, Secretary, MTHSC, other dignitaries, principals of various colleges, and fellow teachers. A very good afternoon to one and all. It's my privilege to welcome you all to this session on meeting the accreditation standards through outcome-based learning. As we are all aware, outcome-based learning is the norm in planning, organizing, delivering, and assessing our curriculum. Hence, it is imperative that we need to understand this area better, especially in the online modality of teaching and learning. We have two eminent persons who I understand will be doing a joint presentation on this topic. Our first resource person for the day is Dr. Indira Bharadwaj, who is the Faculty of Finance at the Delhi School of Business and is also the Dean at the Vivekananda School of Business Studies. She is an MBA in Finance and has a PhD in Business. She is an academician with more than 24 years of teaching experience across institutions in India. She was a research associate at the IIM Indore. She also has a long span of corporate experience and has worked as assessment faculty for universities in the United States and Southeast Asia. She is an expert and a trainer on outcome-based education with assessment of learning, with special focus on critical thinking skills. Along with ma'am, we have Mr. Murthy Poppala, who is a senior consultant with Anubhavam Technologies, who are providers of Creatrix Campus software, a modern cloud-based comprehensive education software. Mr. Murthy has a master's in computer engineering and is now pursuing his PhD. He has hands-on experience in ERP solutions for higher education institutions. He is an expert in the procedures and working of various accreditation bodies and has conducted training and professional development modules for universities and colleges in India and abroad. He was also the lead project coordinator responsible for automation of question paper management and thesis management of a major state government project covering 14 universities and 4,600 institutions. As experts who are aware of the theoretical as well as practical aspects of outcome-based learning, I'm sure Mr. Murthy and Dr. Indira will be able to take us through the nuances of outcome-based learning in the NAC accreditation scenario. On behalf of the Thoma Higher Education Council and the teaching fraternity present here, I extend to you both a very warm welcome. I would also like to welcome Dr. Alex K. Samuel, the Secretary of Thoma Higher Education Council, our moderator, Shalini teacher, principals of various colleges, and all fellow faculty members to this session. Let's all have a very fruitful session. Thank you. Over to you, Shalini teacher.
Thank you, Linchu teacher. I pass on the baton to our presenters. Dr. Indira Bharadwaj, I understand that you will be presenting, ma'am. Are you ready to start? Ma'am, Dr. Indira Bharadwaj. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Good evening, Dr. Indira Bharadwaj here. And first of all,
thank you,
a huge thanks to the Thoma Higher Education Commission and Dr. Alex for this opportunity to come and share a little bit of whatever I have learned from my past experience on accreditation and outcome-based education. Professor Shalini, can you just confirm if I'm audible?
Right now, yes, ma'am. It's a bit, the network at your end is a bit patchy.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes.
Is it? Okay, great. So am I allowed to share my screen or is it possible?
I think the admin here has already started presenting. Yes, sir? Abraham, sir?
The screen is being shared right now, ma'am.
Okay, so you'll be sharing the screen. Just wanted a little more clarity if the screen will be shared by you. That's okay. That's okay.
Whenever you require, you please tell me to change the slide.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So it's indeed a privilege to be present here in this August gathering of academicians and researchers. And I'm really truly honored, and I extend my complete gratitude to the Thoma Higher Education Commission once again. And I'll just start sharing whatever I have gained through my experience on accreditation, achievement of accreditation standards through outcome-based education. Okay, can you just move to the first slide, please? The next slide. Yeah. So why do we need accreditation? The basic question as to why do we need accreditation? Accreditation basically allows you a parity or equivalence. So equivalence of institutions, degrees, certificates across institutions and across countries. Okay. So accreditation has become the norm after, and in India specifically, it has gained significance after India signed the Washington Accord on June 13th, 2014. The Washington Accord actually strives for equivalence and focuses on programs related to engineering and technical education. Okay, so the technical institutions have gained a little bit of global equivalence because the Accord allows our accreditation agencies to accredit institutions and programs. And if the programs are accredited, then they are considered equivalent in countries which have also, assigned the Washington Accord. And similar to Washington Accord, we have other accords as well. We have the Dublin Accord, we have the Sydney Accord, and there is parity between these accords also. So the need for accreditation arises from the need for equivalence across nations for students who would want to shift in the middle of their education from one country to the other. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so this just explains what I've just spoken about. The Sydney Accord and the Dublin Accord are some other accords which are globally prevalent, actually. The next slide, please. Yeah. So when I'm talking about accreditation, the basic fundamental of accreditation is equivalence, as I just mentioned, but equivalence of what is the next question. Equivalence of learning standards, right? Equivalence of learning that the student has gained. So if the student has gone through a program of a specific number of years, what has the student learned is what is to be assessed and presented for equivalence, right? So to assess student learning is the objective of accreditation. So that's how we come to standards which are titled through assurance of learning. So accreditation leads to assurance of learning. Assurance of learning cannot be given in the form of a certificate unless we have some things to describe learning, right? So we have come from equivalence among institutions for learning. The learning is described through standards which are worded through learning outcomes. And that actually gives us the concept of learning outcomes. Okay, so the genesis of learning outcome is how do you describe what is student learning? Okay, so now description of student learning. Now, how do you define if somebody has learned something? How do you describe it, right? So the learning is described in terms of what can the student do after he has completed the program, okay, with that specific institution. Okay, so the ability to perform a specific task with a specific skill is an outcome. Okay, I'm sure a lot of discussion on outcomes, so I'm not going to stress more on what outcomes are, but to be able to come to draft an outcome, all graduate attributes. I mean, attributes as in what is the description of the graduate who has the certificate or the degree. Okay, the description of the attributes of the student who has that graduation degree. I mean, putting it in layman words. So graduate attributes have been defined by the accreditation agencies under the Washington Accord. Okay, so the Washington Accord actually has given you the keywords which have to be used to be able to define graduate attributes. They are the precursors to learning outcomes. Okay, so they are accessible, they are based on some skills, and they have an expected level of attainment or an expected level of performance. For example, like, when you are employing somebody, you think of the dexterity of the hands of a, somebody who's skilled in some physical work. So there are so many things by which you assess the level of performance, right? So the benchmarks have to be established. So the moment I say that there is an outcome, I have to also say, okay, what level of performance are we talking about? Okay, so then we come to expected outcomes, and the term which is used is called attainment. Okay, so we have come from equivalence of learning described through graduate attributes, coming down to learning outcomes, which have been given standards which are measured through outcome attainments. Okay, the next slide, please. The next slide. Yeah. So the defined standards are what are defined by the outcomes, and the description of the outcomes defines the rubric of that outcome. I mean, supposing I know how to read and write. So the quality of what I can write, the way I can write, what I can read, the speed of my reading. So the description of the ability to read and write is what is the real description of an outcome. Okay, so right from graduate attributes defining the skills, we go down to the outcomes, which actually give you the descriptors of the skill that is expected in the student. The next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So you can go over this slide because I've spoken about it. Yeah, next, please. Yeah, so this is an important thing. So the graduate attributes defined by the Washington Accord. Okay, and there are a couple of them, like, it starts with basic engineering knowledge, then you have problem analysis. I don't want to read through the slide, but you can get this. I mean, this is available on Google. So the moment you just say graduate attributes as per the Washington Accord, you can just go and take a look. So see, engineering knowledge, problem analysis, design, development of solutions, and investigation. So these are the core skills, and there are descriptors. which are given by, the application, identification, designing of solutions, investigation, conduction. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide, yeah. Modern tool usage. Okay, so if you talk about softwares and hardwares and the most advanced technology, it comes to modern tool usage. Now see, it has extended itself beyond the institution. So the next attribute is engineer and society. And that is the reason, we talk about sustainability, we talk about social responsibility, we talk about responsible citizenship. All that comes from this one graduate attribute of engineer and the society. So, I mean, it's not just you and your organization and profits. Okay, it's about a lot of other stakeholders, which generally students have not ever been taught of. And that is the reason why the curriculum today focuses so much more on the stakeholders. It focuses so much more on the societal perspective. It's more outward looking rather than inward looking. So it's not about how perfect am I in my knowledge. It's about how good are you for the society. Are you doing something reasonable for people to look up to you with some expectations that you are a graduate, so you will be performing something better than somebody who's not a graduate. So engineer and society is one of attributes. Environmental sustainability, the way I just said, with the SDGs, as targets for all the countries, I think so requires an awareness of what can be the technological developments to improve the sustainable initiatives. Okay, and then comes ethics. Okay, because of the all the problems that the economies are facing, a lot of them are because of frauds, right? So ethics has to be a part of curriculum, and that is the reason it is a prescribed graduate attribute by Washington Accord. Okay, the next slide, please. The next slide. Inventivity and responsibility to it's all about your development as an individual human being, right? So and it's not just about your performance, it's about teamwork. So individual and teamwork, communication, how well are you able to take along people, project management, ability to know finance, and lifelong learning. Let's understand lifelong learning. And that is where, the concept of learning comes in. Because let's understand, learning has to be described to the students. And there is a fundamental shift from learning. The learning that probably my age people will correlate with when they were in schools was like, learn the chapter meant memorization of the chapter. That's it, right? So it was just memorization. So learning was memorization, but now learning is more of unlearning and relearning, right? So it's more about what I should forget because things have changed, okay? Everything is evolving. And what I should remember or now learn more. Okay, what I should know more. So lifelong learning means the skill and the ability in the student to be able to unlearn and relearn as given by Toffler, right? That is more important and critical in students. So, and can you see something like project management and finance? And we're talking about technical education. So 10 years ago, if you asked an engineer, do you know something about finance? The guy would laugh it off. I said, what do I do? Why do I need to know something about finance, right? And if you just see the graduate attributes now, project management and finance is a typical graduate attribute which has to be taught to every single institution who's going in for any accreditation whatsoever. So do you realize how comprehensive a student is trained, how comprehensively the student is trained on? Just because accreditation has made it mandatory for you to take out your graduate attributes in the curriculum, ensure that the student knows that he will learn all this, and also ensure that the student is able to demonstrate. Okay, it's not just about, I can say I taught the student finance, but if my guy doesn't know how to, answer questions or deal with problems in finance, it's no use, right? So the student should be able to demonstrate all these attributes, and the demonstration is assessed through the assessment frameworks, and that is the reason we need outcomes, right? So these graduate attributes are converted to outcomes. They are then assessed using assessment frameworks, which we will discuss a little later. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Similarly, if you just talk about the knowledge profile, now let's understand, we're talking about two different things, knowledge profile and graduate attributes. The difference is knowledge profile is only describing the scope and extent of knowledge that you are putting in the head of the student, right? Graduate attribute was his whole personality. I mean, if a student stands with the degree of a particular institution, he or she should be able to get differentiated straight away, because this student comes from a accredited institution, and that's the reason the student has personality attributes which are aligned to the graduate attributes. Okay, so graduate attributes is like a descriptor of the personality of the student who would have undergone the certifications from the accredited institution, whereas knowledge profile is actually only defining what is the basic content which is being delivered in the classrooms. Okay, so it's like all based on, you know, the sciences, the numerical analysis ability, to theory based formulation, engineering, specialized engineering knowledge. Next slide, please. There are 8 elements, so we need to go to the next slide. The next slide, please. Yeah, so and now you see there is knowledge that supports the engineering design. We never spoke about engineering design, but now engineering design is a part and parcel of all engineering programs. Engineering practice, which is the, you know, application of technology. And then you have engagement with selected knowledge in the research literature of the discipline, right? So creation of knowledge now, because, you know, I want you to think of previous presentations have referred to Bloom's taxonomy, right? So, and Bloom's taxonomy has a hierarchy, and the topmost is creation, right? And that is what is being talked of here, engagement with the literature, so that you know what you're doing beyond what exists, right? So if the student is given the skill to explore beyond what exists, beyond what is obvious, beyond what is explicit, that is what is the creation level of the Bloom's taxonomy. So I'll just correlate, right? So knowledge, let's differentiate. Knowledge is different from graduate attributes. Knowledge, and you know what, till date, everybody thought that, you know, education was all about the knowledge that is given in the classroom. Okay, nobody knew, nobody could think of an engineering program giving you a personality makeup. Okay, normally management programs are attributed with that thing. And then we realized that engineering could also be a complete education. Now let's understand, if an engineer is given these graduate attributes, engineer may not need to get into a management program to be able to handle a managerial job, right? So he has his technical knowledge, and he also has managerial abilities because the graduate attributes have given him that. So that is how comprehensive and how encompassing is this assessment and accreditation process, which ensures that the student gets a comprehensive workup on his complete personality and not just knowledge. And that's the reason why knowledge is differentiated from graduate attributes. The next slide, please. The next slide. Yeah. Now this is critical. And, let's just understand the way I just said, demonstration of what the student has learned. So the focus of outcomes-based education is not what I'm teaching. That's like course objective, right? But what is learned, that is an outcome. So what I decided to teach is the objective of my getting into my classes, right? But what my student is able to do after he has come out of my class is the outcome, right? So let's see, the face of education has now changed. It's not facing the students, it's facing the teacher actually. So what the student is able to do is what the result of the whole teaching is all about, right? So the focus is on what the student is able to do rather than what the faculty has taught. So claims by the faculty that I covered this syllabus really don't matter anymore. What the student is able to do after the faculty has finished the course is what matters, right? So that is the objective of shifting to outcome-based education. Otherwise, we could have just gone without it, right? So, and the assessment of what the student is able to do is what is learned by the student. The assessment of the learning is done through the outcomes. So outcomes is not the end, it's the means to the end. The means to the end is what has the student learned, and is he able to demonstrate that? That is the end. And to be able to get to that end, we use outcomes as the tool. So outcomes and assessments are the tools that are used for the students to be able to demonstrate what they have learned, right? Next slide, please. Yeah. So what is assurance of learning rationale? And this is given by, of course, a business accreditation, AACSB, but then, it's like a over-encompassing thing because assurance of learning actually came from AACSB. So quality faculty, relevant curriculum, and, direct and indirect assessment. So assurance of learning goes a step ahead, okay? We do not talk about assessment done by the faculty or by the institution. We go a step beyond. We don't even go to the institution to be able to test what the student has learned, right? So if I am a university, I have taught something, I make the question paper, I give marks to my students, why should I be trusted? So who will tell me how my students are doing? I'm not going to tell how my students are doing. So let's be transparent. Who will tell me how my students are doing? The guy who's employing my student will tell me how am I doing, and that's where the role of the stakeholder comes in. So the alumni, the parents, the employers per se, actually mostly from the employers. So the employers actually give you the record of the performance of the students, and that is called an indirect assessment. And trust me, all the accreditation agencies are now talking about both the assessments. We need the assessments from the stakeholders, and that is more critical. And there is a weightage which is given to the assessment that I do for my students, and then what the stakeholder does for my student. And the mix of both is being used to assess the learning. So the learning of the student is not what I claim or what the student claims, it is what the stakeholders will tell, right? So that is indirect assessment. So direct assessment is what I do, whether in my class, whether through a project, whether it's a field-based project, whether it's a research project, whatever be the pedagogy. It could be a quiz, assignment, test, all these internal classroom pedagogies or external classroom pedagogies, as long as the assessment is done by me, it becomes an direct assessment. But indirect assessment is what is done by the stakeholders. So if my employer gives me a feedback, if my parents give me a feedback, that is even more important. So both assessment pedagogies and methodologies are used to assess learning, and when they achieve the pre-decided level of attainment. So if I had decided that my student should be able to get to a proficiency level, and people agree that they have achieved that level, and that means my students have learned, and that means I have achieved assurance of learning, right? So if I first, so what do I need to do? First, I need to have a benchmark. Second, I need to have a method of assessment. Third, I need to assess. Fourth, I need to check whether my benchmarks have been achieved. If my benchmarks have been achieved, my learning has been proven and I have exhibited assurance of learning. If not, I have not achieved learning. Okay, next step, please. Next slide. Yeah, okay. And so there is a critical importance of stakeholder, involvement, the way I just explained in the assurance of learning. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now how do I get this done? Okay. So I have to identify outcomes. That's the competency goal. Outcome, I have to identify who will be my key stakeholders who will help me assess me and my students. How will it be done? So it has to be done systematically. I should know what percentage to direct, what percentage to indirect, etc. And then what are my benchmarks and how do I plan to achieve them? So my teaching learning pedagogy has to be explained well in advance. Okay. Next slide, please. And then, of course, if you can just read the second paragraph of the slide, maybe the slide can be written later. What we teach, how we assess ought to be aligned with the intended learning outcomes, right? So what we teach, how we assess, and what will be the outcome. So the outcomes will decide how will I teach. They will decide what will I teach. They will decide what will be my process of assessment. How many times will I assess? What will be the periodicity, etc. Okay. All this has to be done to be able to have a quality outcome-based education process. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. So it is focusing on, programs, instructional efforts, and, the students should be able to demonstrate the learning that they have been required or they have been told that they are expected to achieve. Okay. So developing a clear set of learning outcomes and establishment of assessment systems is the key to a successful implementation of outcome-based education. Next slide, please. Yeah. So how does it benefit? It obviously, because when we talk about outcome-based education, then we know that we are talking about the faculty actually sharing with the student what the student is expected to know and at what level of proficiency. Okay, what the student is expected to know and at what level of proficiency, so that the student kind of knows the benchmarks and the parameters on which he will be assessed. Okay, so that's the most important thing. Okay, the most important thing is the student should be told what is expected and how will the student get assessed. Okay, so obviously if the student knows how will the student get assessed, the student will prepare accordingly, present accordingly. To be able to extract that from the student, the teachers have to design the material accordingly. So they have to tell the student, I'm going to teach you this is how I'm going to teach you, this is how I'm going to assess you, this is how you're expected to perform. Okay, that's the most important thing, and that's where rubrics come. Rubrics are the most critical thing of outcome based education. Okay, if I am identifying outcomes, but if I do not have rubrics, it's a useless exercise, absolutely useless exercise, because if I don't have descriptors which differentiate from a grade A to a grade B or a grade C, it's useless. So if the student doesn't know that if I perform, what level should I perform to get a grade A, or what level should I perform to get a grade C, then there is no point assessing the student also, right? So to be able to get to the student's level of performance, the student is very comfortable if the student knows I will be assessed on these parameters, I have to exhibit this level of proficiency, this will be the periodicity of my assessment, and the rubric is shared right up front. Okay, so in outcome-based education, make sure that all the outcomes are mapped to assessment components, but mapping is not enough. Rubrics will, with accurate descriptors, and trust me, for every single assignment that you create, the rubric has to be customized to that assignment. Okay, because if I'm asking for a case, and if I'm having a big case and the focus of my case is strategy, so then my rubric has to say that this case focuses on strategy, because a case can be used for finance, strategy, marketing altogether. Similarly, in engineering education, the focus could be to assess the critical thinking of the student, or the focus could be to assess the content, or the focus could be to assess the analytical skills. Unless I have a rubric to explain to the student that I'm going to assess you on these skills, and this is the level of performance at all the skills that I expect from you, trust me, the assessment systems will go out of use. They are of absolutely no use. So outcome-based education, the success depends on the fact that outcomes have to be identified, mapped with assessment components. The moment I map them with an assessment component, then I have to create a rubric. So if I'm saying, okay, outcome 1, 2, 3 are mapped by assessment component 1, then with 1, 2, 3, I should have a rubric that to get a grade A in outcome 1, what should be my level of performance? To get a grade B in outcome 2, what should be my level of performance? So that is the most critical part, and that is where the faculty has to spend more time. So making a question is not enough. Designing the rubric for the question is like more critical. And that's what, like I did about 4 years of I was an assessment faculty for a lot of institutions in the US and Southeast Asia. And that was precisely what I was doing. I was actually, when the question papers came to me, I said, listen, you need to design a rubric for this. So I would design a rubric. I would map them I will check if because I have to see the whole assessment. If I have 10 components, all the outcomes have to be assessed equally and adequately. So if I feel that one outcome is like failing, and there's just one small quiz which is assessing that outcome, I know it's insufficient. So I have to go back and tell the faculty, listen, this outcome is not getting assessed adequately, add something more to it, right? So enough components which are required to assess the outcome, and then detailed rubric for every single assessment component to ensure that the student is clear. If I want to grade A, I need to do this. Okay, so that is the success. That is the key to success of outcome-based education, right? So the student is clear. There's so much of transparency. There's no subjectivity in assessment. There's a problem of subjectivity in assessment. OBE actually helps you reduce subjectivity. And I'll come back to a debate around subjectivity and objectivity here. But right now, I'm talking about removal of subjectivity from assessments. And if my assessment pedagogy is good enough, then there is absolutely no scope for subjectivity, because once the rubrics are there, assessments become so transparent and so trustworthy that the student feels so confident attempting the assignment, and also feels confident that after he has got the score, he knows why he has got the score. There's no question of a re-evaluation or a grievance related to the assessment, and that is the biggest outcome. Transparency and trust and integrity within the system is what is brought about through outcome-based education. Okay, and I can also precisely tell my students are fantastic in critical thinking, or my students are fantastic in content. It can happen that my students can be very good in content but zero in critical thinking. Vice versa, my students can be very creative but zero in content. So whatever is good or bad about my student, I should be able to describe the student. And trust me, the outcome attainment can be presented to the high employers. I can tell them this is what the student has achieved in outcomes. So the employer kind of knows, this is the student. He's very good in creativity, so he can choose students high on outcome 1 or students high on outcome 2, what kind of a student I want. And they can come back to the institution. Give me students who are high on this outcome. Give me students who are low on this outcome. So you can see the whole network becomes so transparent and so supportive of each other that not only just the students and faculty, but the employers also get benefited because of outcome-based education, right? Next slide, please. Okay, so yes, but then, the whole process actually decides, the success or failure is dependent on whether my outcomes were clear, whether my outcomes were demonstrated sufficiently. The next slide, please. Whether my strategies and content were good enough. I can have a fancy rubric, I can have a fancy assessment, but if my teaching was terrible, the whole system fails again. Okay, so I can create a fancy rubric, but trust me, my students will get a grade D all across. Why? Because my teaching strategies were not good, right? So it's an assessment for me also as a faculty. And this is a continuous thing. So I have to see with every assessment, my outcomes have to increase with every assessment component. And if they are not, then something is wrong with me. Either I'm not paying attention, or I'm not teaching properly, or my assessment is not proper. Somewhere something is wrong, right? So it becomes a check for me also as a faculty. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So that was the whole circle of the purpose of outcomes-based education and the way the purpose it serves. And okay, this is the Bloom's taxonomy, which kind of is the basis for development of outcomes. Okay, and there's so much material available, and a lot has been discussed already as to how do you frame the outcomes. Okay, and let's understand that we started with the basics of learning, and I told you, going back to my school age, where learning was like memorization. So remember, we were at level 1. So that's like school education. When we're talking about higher education, we have to reach level 6, which is creation. Okay, so we all know this Bloom's taxonomy, and of course, this is the cognitive domain. But then, it is all about how well is the student able to think. Trust me, outcome-based education focuses on enhancing and improving the ability of the student to think better. Okay, think better, think faster, think more comprehensively, think critically, think out of the box, all these thinking skills. Higher education is meant to work on the thinking skill of the student. Trust me, it's not so much on knowledge. Everything is available. His textbooks are available. The content is available on Google. The content is available in textbooks. What is not available in textbooks is your thinking ability, your out-of-the-box solutions, your ability to analyze situations critically. Every time a new environment evolves, like COVID has come for past 2 years, nobody knew how to deal with pandemics at such a mass scale ever in the future, in the past. So it was a new situation. Do you think any case study solution would help business organizations? No. People have to think out of the box. They have to think on the spot. So thinking on the spot, thinking out of the box, thinking critically, all these are thinking skills which come in, and that is what is the creation and evaluation. So evaluation is critical thinking, and creation is thinking out of the box. And these are the primary thinking skills that higher education institutions should focus on. And that is what has to be brought out in the outcome-based. So I'm focusing on these two because we are talking at higher education level. I'm not talking at the school level or the high school level or the higher secondary level. Next slide, please. The next slide. Yeah. Okay, now these are, just the previous slide, please. Just the one previous. Yes, this is important. Okay, so, how do we go about it? And, this is a sample. So just see the way the wordings of the outcomes are. There are some 7 outcomes, but I'm just, skipping to read all of them. But you will see, it's all about communication, identification, apply engineering, design, and all these things. So all the skills that have been identified from the Bloom's taxonomy, they have to be put into words and phrases to be able to create outcomes. Okay, and this is a sample from, of course, ABET, given from ABET. So this is for a normal engineer. engineering college. So you can go and look up, samples from ABET, and they are a good guide for any engineering school to frame their outcomes. And next slide, please. The next slide. Yeah. Now, what is the problem? The problem is, awareness, as I just said, that you don't know what outcomes-based education can do to you. You don't know how to get it to interdiscipline. Now, with the NEP in force, you have a lot of focus on multidisciplinary knowledge. So now outcome-based education will become a little more tricky, because now you're not going to focus on just one discipline. You will have interdisciplinary subjects within the same program. So outcome-based education becomes much more comprehensive. And of course, if you look at the Washington Accord, it is already interdisciplinary. So yes, till date, we have not been collaborating across disciplines, but with NEP in force now, we will be collaborating. So this problem of, this limitation of lack of collaboration will get removed slowly. Similarly, assessment, the way I said, creation of a rubric, communication of the rubric to the student, assessment according to the rubric, scoring according to the rubric. These are the critical success factors for any assessment pedagogy using OBE. So unless the faculty is trained on assessing using these pedagogies, it is very difficult to have a successful implementation of outcome-based education. Right? Next slide, please. Yeah. And obviously, it's a lot of rework for faculty. Trust me, if the faculty is spending maybe 10 hours or 12 hours a week just preparing, if you're following outcome-based education, the time is just doubled, if not tripled. For the first time, if you're doing it, trust me, the time is tripled. Why? Because you will have iterations of rubrics, okay? Rubrics don't come through in one go unless you're trained on it, right? Like we used to create rubrics, of course, but then, any faculty, even creating outcomes is a big deal, actually. Even creating outcomes is an iterative exercise, and multiple times you create a phrase and finally you come back to an outcome. So first thing is creation of an outcome is an iterative process. Then comes rubrics, which is a further iterative process. And every assessment, mapping every question to an outcome and then creating a rubric for it. Oh my God, what a humongous exercise. But trust me, if you do it to that level, outcome-based education is nothing best. It's nothing can be better than outcome-based education to assess the learning of a student, right? But the problem is cumbersome. It needs time. There is no incentivization for faculty to do it. And, student satisfaction is not the big deal, or employer satisfaction does not mean a lot, okay? It does mean to the institution, but I don't know if there is anything attached to the faculty. For example, if an employer says, okay, students of this batch for this program were much better than students of the other batch. So does the faculty get any incentive because they prepared the students much better? I'm not sure if the institutions are thinking on these lines. But if the institutions start thinking on these lines, that the stakeholder feedback becomes a critical component of assessment of faculty, that becomes an incentive. And trust me, you have to incentivize the faculty because they are spending so much more time and effort to be able to create rubrics, create assessments, do such a detailed iterative process to be able to create, to gain trust of the student, to gain trust of the stakeholder, and ensure that the stakeholder gets what the stakeholder wants, okay? And stakeholder is perfectly satisfied, and so is the student, right? So it's a cumbersome process, right? And you need well-trained faculty to do it to that level. And right now, not everybody is aspiring for an A+ or an A++ grade. But if you aspire for an A++ grade, that is exactly what is expected out of you as an institution. Next slide, please. Yeah. So successful process means, it has to be well documented, faculty has to be trained, the process has to be very clear. And by the way, the process will also change because it's an iterative process. So every time the process has a problem, you redo the process also within the institution. So to that level, you need to have iterations even in your process, like, by iteration. So I took a pedagogy A, I took an attainment B, assessment component, say quiz, and I realized that my students are all falling in grade C and below. So I need to change my teaching pedagogy, right? So I need to document it. So that's my plan of action. So I document the process, I redo that quiz, redo another quiz on the same content, and I have a better outcome. And that's what I showcase, that listen, I changed my pedagogy because students were not doing well, and I realized I wasn't teaching good enough. And so now this quiz has proven that my students are doing better. Okay, so that's why I'm saying the process of OBE is an iterative process. Everybody learns. So if there is an institution who claims that they are good in OBE, trust me, there's nothing like being good in OBE. Okay, every institution is in the learning phase. However long you may have been practicing it, however long you may have been claiming to be able to showcase outcome-based education, but it is a continuous, ever evolving exercise with a lot of effort from faculty. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, so I think I have just kind of explained all of this. Next slide, please. Yeah, and now see, I told you that's right, and it takes a lot of time. So one of the products that I saw, of course we have seen a lot of products and I have used a lot of them, and in fact my company, when I was working in 2006 as an assessment faculty, was Forbes Group KPO. We also had developed a software to assist us in the assessments, because numerical compilation of data of the score of the student, and then the weight that the outcome has, and then cumulative scores of the outcome right up to the final score for a student on a particular outcome after all assessment components. And then it's a huge mathematical arithmetical exercise, actually just a waste of time for faculty, because it's just plus minus multiply divide. So we need somebody to do this, right? So we also developed a software, and one software that I came across is by Anubhavam, which is Creatrix Campus. So they kind of systematize the process. They help you plan, they help you schedule, they help you assess, and they help you redo, right? So they help you do it, so it kind of saves your time. It kind of, all the backend calculation which you would do manually on Excel, it's possible. I have done it on Excel, and now the only thing is it takes time. So whatever I would do on Excel, putting all formulae in all assessment components and getting a final score, all that is done at the back end. So yes, this tool is handy. It kind of, saves my time to about 50 to 60%. And that is the reason kind of, I have personally kind of implemented this in my own campus. And now I've been using it for almost 3 years now. So I've realized that you do need a software, because otherwise it's a humongous exercise. So many calculations, and all faculty may not be comfortable doing it. And one small error in your Excel sheet and your result will go haywire. So any human error makes the system go useless. So it's better that you have a system which is kind of flawless. So it's better to have a software support. And one of the best, of the ones which are available is Creatrix. So they kind of do a very good job, because they've kind of understood the whole process of question-wise mapping to outcomes, how to calculate weighted averages. You can, we decided for my subject, for instance, I would take 5 quizzes and I would choose the best 2. So I was able to customize it to take the highest 2 quiz scores for a student. Another colleague of mine wanted an average of all the 5 scores. So she was able to customize it to get the average of all the 5 scores. So going down to that extent, I'm able to, if I give 5 questions, I want to take the best 2, answers for the student, the system will allow me to do that. So we have to be sure, all the iterations that I would like to take in my assessment process, the system allows me to do that, which I would kind of not do it if I did not have that process, because I may not always it is possible to have that kind of time, because there's a lot of academic administration activity also which is going on all the time in institutions. So which leaves very little time for accreditation work. So, taking out time to, create assessment component, and then create question-wise outcome, and then create a score, and then, see the attainment level, and then check where you went wrong, and then strategize. It's a time-taking process. So anything which helps you save your time is kind of a welcome thing. So one of the products that I have used is this Creatrix. So, and we have the product head and a senior consultant from that company who can explain the product a little bit more, just to, tell you that it is doable using a software backup. But I hope whatever I explained in terms of the whole closing of the loop for outcome-based education, I hope I just made some clarity on how we are, we can go about it. I will be very happy to take questions, but probably after we, finish the presentation. So over to Mr. Murthy Pupala from my side. And thank you so much for your patient listening. And I'm really awaiting questions, right? Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Murthy, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, everyone. And this is Murthy from Creatrix Campus. Would like to, start the accreditation framework. And Creatrix, as ma'am has, explained about how the outcome-based education play a major role in the accreditation process, how we have to inculcate, the complete learning process through outcome-based education. We have designed carefully through platform like Creatrix. So I would like to just explain them clearly. And I wanted you to maximize the screen so that everyone can see the screen clearly. Yeah, thank you for that. And as ma'am mentioned, the accreditation work is a laborious job and it is a humongous work. So everyone has to put their efforts to collect the data, process the data, assess them and analyze them. So based on the problem statements across the globe, we have designed this accreditation application so that it caters to all your requirements. Let me take them one by one clearly. The first in the framework, we call it like planning. And before I explain the planning phase, I wanted to mention that Creatrix has a flexible accreditation framework where it has been divided the accreditation into 3 phases, like planning phase, assessing phase, and something like analyzing phase. In the planning phase, if you take any institution into consideration, our IQAC team will be taking care about collecting the data and processing that. But if IQAC alone taking the responsibility for doing all these activities, then they couldn't be done on time. So what we have brought, we brought decentralization concept there in the planning phase, where every stakeholder in the institution will be taking one accountable activity and they'll perform. So that can be done through planning phase, where IQAC team will delegate the work to different members within the institution. Say for instance, I'm one of the faculty who has got complete. Then for instance, you are the IQAC head. So what will happen? You will be assigning that curricular aspects to me so that I'll be taking care about that particular module, and I'll be start getting the insights from Creatrix, the general guidelines of how metrics data in terms of qualitative activity and quantitative could be collected together to submit them. So that is something like comes under planning phase. Not only delegating the work we do through that, even you can set up target lines. For instance, the cycle is going to end up in the month of October. So you can set up internal target line maybe around May 31st, June 30 or July something, so that you'll have 2 to 3 months of time to refine the activities which you have done so far. Because it is very important for us to evaluate each and every rubric, evaluate each and every metric through rubric, so that we can see what the score we have got in the curricular aspects, what we have got in the student progression, and what we have got in the faculty information and contributions. So we designed this with a timeline so that everyone will be taking responsibility with their target lines and then start working on that. So that comes under planning phase. Along with that, even we provide the templates, whatever the current changes or amendments done by the accreditation bodies like NAC or NBA, every template will be uploaded into the system, so that as and when you get into that metric, you don't need to look into that what kind of changes has been done. It is already been populated there in your screen, so that you can download the template and you can update the data and put it into the system. That is one way. Another way is something like, since Creatrix has all the modules to capture the information, put them in the metric, it can be done automatically as well. So that comes into planning phase. It is one of the important phase for us to delegate the work and make sure assignment happen uniformly across all the stakeholders in the institution. Next to that is called assessing phase. Yes, and when as a criteria owner, I have completed my work, I'll submit the work to my IQAC head. So my IQAC head has an option to go there, review all the data which I have updated there in the system, when they can go and cross-check everything, and they can either approve the work which I have done, or they can provide the feedback. What are the metrics I made wrong, or the supporting documents have not been properly uploaded in the system, where it went wrong. All the information they can analyze on the system rather going and doing it manually, and they can provide their insights to the criteria owner, so that criterion owner can go and change that or enhance that. So back and forth, this communication can happen through assessing module. As a IQAC coordinator, you can do it. As a criterion owner, I can keep on enhancing them. Come to a common conclusion that, yes, with respect to curricular aspect, everything has been done. Then you can freeze it, you can approve it. So that comes into assessing phase. That we designed this phase by taking experts like you people across the globe, so that every rubric which we have inculcated there will take care about the score of each and every metric in the NAC. or each and every report in the NBA. So that is completely in the assessing phase. Once that is been done, then we will move on to the third phase called analyzing phase. It is very important, where system will show the real-time dashboards. It shows the deficiency report in criteria, in which criteria you got low score, in which criteria you got low metric grades, so that you can go and enhance them. Since you have got 6 more months, you have something like time on your hand to do all of them, and you can refine so that whatever the desired grade, maybe A++ or A+, based on the current strategy, you can keep on going and defining them. So that can be done through that. And this analyzing phase is very, very important for us to compare the previous version with the current version. It shows that what improvement you have done so far, and whether it is par with the expectation or target by the management, so that everything could be done automated way through Creatrix. And in between, for making the effective communication, Creatrix has a tool called communication tool. It will be keep on sending reminders. As a key indicator one or criteria one, I have not done the work on time. So the reminder could be sent to them, so that they'll be doing the work on time and making sure there won't be any sort of deviation there in the quality of the data or timelines as well. So that is all about, something like framework. And can you go to next slide, please? Yeah, so it is other, format of what we discussed in the previous slide, both are same. Can you move on to the next one? Yeah, so far we have seen the framework of Creatrix, how intuitive it is to, plan the accreditation process, assess that, analyze the weaker areas through different metrics and all. Now we are going deeper into each and every criterion. I'll take few minutes of each and everything. The first and foremost pointer in the accreditation process is called effective outcome-based education implementation. As a product, as a platform, Creatrix has been divided the OBE process into 2 phases called planning phase and assessing phase, also called as evaluation phase. In the planning phase of OBE, what we do, we allow who are all heading the program or department to see how the planning has happened. So we have got intuitive dashboards, which is there on the screen, where it shows that how many program outcomes have been designed for the program. And not only that, even you can see that how many subjects within the program has done the mapping, how many subjects did not do the mapping. So that information I could view there on the screen, and it supports all the 5 levels of mapping. The first level of mapping between course with the program outcome, it supports course outcome with program outcome, it supports, and important pointer like assessments, which maps with the course outcomes, it will support, as well as topics in each and every course will be mapped with the with the outcomes also it supports. And very predominant mapping, something like questions mapped with the course outcomes also Creatrix supports, and it will bring you complete idea on how many faculty members have done the work, how many are in the pending, so that we will get a bird's eye view on that, and you can plan it properly so that before start of any semester, this exercise could be done, and if any deviation in that can be corrected. So this dashboard is very important for us to see almost like 100 subjects, planning at a single page, and it gives the real-time insights about it as well. Can you move on to the next slide? Yeah, once the planning has been done and it has been approved by the head of the department, then the real, evaluation process gets started. During the evaluation process, that happens through assessments. Creatrix design the components in a such a way that every assessment has to be given with a rubric. As ma'am told in previous presentation, rubric design is very important, and making student to understand the rubric is also play a major role there. So every rubric, whatever they design, will be tagged to the particular assignment or assessment, and as and when there are any sort of deviation in that could be verified by the faculty, and they can go and change it. Once the assessment has been conducted in a team of 40 to 50 students, then we can get the insights or analytics like this, which you are seeing there on the screen, where you can see there are 4 outcomes have been analyzed in this assessment called assignment 1, where each and every outcome attainment has been given with a clear attainment like 50%, 40%. And even we have drilled on operations to go to the next level to see who are the students did not attain the particular outcome. So that play a major role there inside that. And not only that, even right side of that, you can see Bloom's attainment level as well. Bloom's taxonomy is very important in the teaching learning process, where this assessment has been evaluated with two domains of Bloom's, something like psychomotor and affective domain. It shows the complete average of the particular cohort. And yeah, so it is all about different insights which you will be getting automatically out of the system, which will supplement or which will be supporting your real-time process. Yeah, so can you go to next slide? So the other view of what we have seen in the previous slide we have given here, you can always see the comparison with the threshold or the minimum value you're expecting from the section of students and what they attained. So the comparison charts also we provide you, so that it will be handy for you to understand where you need to focus, which domain you need to focus. There are some students, they may be very good at remembering level, but they are very weak at analyzing or applying level. So that insights Creatrix will provide intuitively to you to understand them and apply proper methodology, pedagogy, so that you can attain them easily. So that is all about it. And you can see different slides also there, like recommendation, activity or action plan, and strategies. So recommendation, you can pick each and every student and you can do the recommendation.
Excuse me, Murthy sir, can I please intervene?
Please,
We've
ma'am.
almost reached the end of the session. Can we quickly conclude it, sir?
Sure, ma'am. Sure, definitely. In 5 minutes of time, I'll conclude that, ma'am. Thank you for that. Yeah. So like this, you have different comparisons of that. And then can you go to next slide, please? Yeah. So like that, just we do end-to-end outcomes. And as ma'am told, every activity of student has to be mapped with one of the outcome. And we have to, make sure student is also understanding right from the first day of their first undergraduation or post-graduation. Are they going in right direction? All the graduate attributes are going to be attained by them, or where they are weak. So telling them the end of graduation doesn't help them at all. So telling that right from day one is very important, and Creatrix does it intuitively by sending out notification on their portal, on their mobile. They can see their they can see their attainments and they can strategize themselves so that they'll be getting everything within the time. And another screenshot which you are seeing there on the screen is something like planner. As we discussed in our previous screenshot, the planner play a major role, where you can see different users being assigned to each and every criterion of NAAC, right from curricular aspects to the last criterion. And sometimes you may assign 1 or 2 members extra to each and every criterion, that also it supports. And you can see the target lines also have been given. And as a dean or as an accuracy coordinator, you have an option to go there and see the percentage of progress also. Where we are we at 50% or are we at 100%? Everything could be shown there on the planner as well. So that is all about the planning phase. And next to that is called assessing phase. And can you move to the next one? And assessing phase is something like how many criterion are completely evaluated, how many are ready to convert them into SSR, that we can see there on the screen. And the next to that is called generation of SSR or SAR, that we are going to see right now. Can you go to next slide? Yeah. So SSR generation play a major role, and it is very tedious job, because sometimes what happens, there might be some improvements there in metric 4 or 1.3.2 or 1.3.5, and collecting the supporting documents, place them on the right place, also play a major role for generation of SSR. Creatrix does it automatically. We have a tool to generate them, and it will generate in a sequential order along with the supporting documents, so that you can click on the download report to get the report in a single click. So that not only saving the time, but also it is it is enhancing the complete process flow of accreditation there. Next to that is called analyzing, and can you click on the next screenshot? Yeah, it is very important and useful tool called analyzer and accreditation. Whatever the work we have done so far, we need to know the forecasted grade or the grade which we are going to get. Creatrix does it. As ma'am mentioned, all the arithmetic calculations and all the numerical rubrics which we have given there in the system will automatically calculate the grade which you are going to get it there in the real inspection. So that you can see there like A++, and each and every criteria where you got low score, what are the metrics you need to focus more, so that your score will be get enhanced. So that information also it will show there, and the comparison charts like this will help you. You can set up threshold for curricular aspect like 3.51. And if it goes lesser than that, it will show there on the screen, and it not only does that, it will send out some notification reminders that you are expecting A++, but the current system or the current data processed showcasing only A+. These are all the areas we have to improve. The weekly ones and the bi-weekly ones or monthly one system will send the notification to the respective members so that it alert them to make sure the desired grade is attained by the institution happily, easily, and it reduces. We have already done a lot of research on that. It reduces almost like 60 to 70% of manual efforts done by the stakeholders like criteria owners, key indicators, or IQSA team through the system, and it enhances the grade for sure. And it is not only that, it is establishing the process which will be transparent to all the members in the institution, and they'll be ready to confront any kind of inspections. It is all about what we would like to showcase you with a small presentation, and of course it is something like version to discuss, and there are many other rubric mechanisms which we will be detailing discuss whenever we get time. Thank you so much, one and all who present there and patiently listen to our presentation, and it's a very glad that we have time this to present and discuss with you and get a lot of insights from you as well.
Shalini ma'am.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Indra Bharadwaj and Mr. Murthy Pupala. The floor is open for questions now. If anybody has questions, you can either type into the chat box or unmute yourself and speak. If these questions are very specific, they will be addressed by the people concerned. Please direct it to the person you want to ask, and also identify yourself when you speak, or write into the chat box. Please go ahead.
Shall we continue?
Yeah, so thank you from my side and Mr. Murthy's side. We don't have any questions, but feel free. You can always get in touch with us through the organizers of the webinar. So a huge thanks and gratitude to each one of you for being very patient audience. Thank you. I know it's fag end of the day, and I know it's a Saturday evening, so we can understand the mindset also. So thanks once again.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you from us, Dr. Indra and Mr. Murthy once again. Perhaps the reason why there aren't many questions is that this, definition of outcome-based learning and meeting the accreditation process through outcome-based learning to a very great extent is determined by the university, because we are all constrained by the course, which is designed in terms of its course outcomes and program outcomes by the university, and it's at the level of curriculum delivery that we have some amount of freedom, if at all. So, thank you once again, ma'am, for that brilliant and fluent talk, which actually told us about the importance of feedback. The student participation, the stakeholders' participation, how critical that role is in defining the outcomes attained by students, how rubric matters in defining our assessment. Every form of question that we ask in our assessment. And there again, however, the area where we have some amount of freedom is our internal assessment, where we set our own question papers. It's not again prescribed by the university. We are very, very thankful to you, both of you, for giving such a precise and a talk that was comprehensive and made us aware of how important it is to have an outcome-based system which is transparent and which is continuous, which keeps challenging us to rework and redefine our delivery system. Thank you very much. The onus of thanking the whole gathering here also falls on me. So let me go ahead with that duty as well. Thank you very much to the speakers and all the participants who
Madam,
kind to share. Yes, sir.
I'm Professor Srivatsan. I really
Yes.
appreciate the presentation by Indraji and Murthy. But I want to know how many people have taken this kind of platform and really implemented the outcome-based education in their courses. Is there any something like a case study available? It will help a lot for the colleges as well as promoting the initiatives you people have taken.
If I can take that question, Mr. Murthy can add on. Actually, in India, the way it was just brought out very beautifully by Shalini ma'am that, we're all constrained by the university system and our universities take a lot of time to evolve. So by the time they actually evolve to come to the expected levels of, process improvements which are required for the complete implementation of OBE, it will take some time because it needs a complete revamp of the system. But there are a lot of institutions outside India in the US because I have worked with them almost 15 years ago. And I can share some samples from the work that we did. And there, of course, the extent to which they were closing the loop is evident. So one of the universities was Butler, one of them was George Washington, one of them was U21 Global. So if you just go and look at their assessment patterns and the rubrics that they have developed, you'll be able to get a lot of them. Maybe, if you just delve a little deeper into their websites or into their study material. So there are institutions who I know personally who have closed the loop and have gone to that deep and extent to be able to measure things, but very accurately and transparently, but not in India. And the system is not that robust. And our frameworks, by the way, NAC and NBA, also leave a lot of scope where you can do away without all these things. Like, if you're not closing the loop and if you're not that robust in your systems, it is quite acceptable by NAC and NBA and the accreditation frameworks in India. We need time to evolve to the standards. But yes, we do have examples, but they are fortunately or unfortunately based out of India. I hope that helps.
I'm struggling to see how to transform the attitude of the affiliating university college system. It has to change over from bureaucratic approach and controller of exam type approach to one of empowering the colleges to achieve this, and they should act as facilitators. Okay, I've been working on it, so I will get in touch because India needs the transformation. I'm not worried about private sector.
Absolutely.
Okay, we are cheating our own students by this kind of college approach.
Absolutely. See, PPP model of education is the best way for India, given the volume and the scale at which we need to provide higher education. So affiliate college is typically the model of PPP, which is public-private partnership model. But I also come from an affiliate college and I face exactly the same constraint of the university not willing to change. And even if I want to do certain things, I'm completely limited by the extent to which I can go. So not a word can change in the academic calendar. So that is the extent of limitation that we work with. So what I have shared today is a very comprehensive overview. And, it's something like a dream world of OBE, which is, difficult, not impossible. But that is exactly what it is. So we should know why we are doing what we are doing. Though we are doing a piecemeal job, we are not doing it completely and fully. But then whatever we are doing, we should know what is the end result. So the end result is to make that complete robustness in the system. But whatever level we are able to achieve, I think it's a good step forward. So at least getting NAC NBA activated, getting accreditation activated, getting OBE activated, at least that's a good step. Getting multidisciplinary approach, the NEP, that's another very good step. But we still need multiple more steps to reach that level of closing the loop where the stakeholders actually come back and tell us you did a good job. So that's a long, far way ahead. Yeah.
We're running out of time, so I will share my ideas and thoughts with you people.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Sure, sir. And I wanted to add one more point here. And yeah, as the implementation point of view, whatever the implementations we have done, so across the globe, and what are the enhancements we have done to their institution, where the teaching learning process, how it has enhanced, how the student results been impacted or enhanced by OB implementation. That case study details, sure, we will share it with you, sir, and you can see them, and whatever the queries you have, you can raise them, and we can address them through emails as well.
We'll be very happy to take questions later after the webinar. Whenever you feel like talking to us, I think you can get back to us through the organizers. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Shalini?
Okay, shall I go on with the formal procedure of proposing a vote of thanks? Thank you very much today's distinguished guests being Dr. Indira Bharadwaj and Mr. Murli Popala. I'm indeed thankful to Dr. Alex Matthew, who is the coordinator of this entire webinar, as I am to my own principal, Dr. Johnson Baby, and the principals of the other colleges who joined in this program and have made their presence felt in such a gracious and engaging manner. Thank you very much, sirs. I'm thankful to the organizing team of today's program. I am thankful to Dr. Susan Abraham and Dr. A. Abraham, who is, the admin, who is managing the entire digital system for us today. And to all the participants who've spared a Saturday so graciously to advance themselves, not just in their careers, but rather in this whole process of enhancing and improving the digital systems of curriculum delivery that is the need of the hour, that we are so dedicatedly engaging with right now, and that we need to go forward with. Thank you once again for your presence. And I pass the baton to Dr. Susan Thomas to inform the gathering of tomorrow's proceeds as well. Thank you once again, and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini. Once again, thank you, respective resource persons, and all our participants who are still online. I just have to make a few announcements. Due to some technical difficulty, we had to reschedule one session today. So tomorrow we will have to begin a little early. And I think we'll start at 1:30. The detailed schedules will be sent via WhatsApp and email to all the participants. Kindly note, we'll have to move our session a little early. We'll start at 1:30 and conclude at the proposed time. And at 1:30, we'll have the session by Dr. Geeta that we missed out today. Thank you all once again for your patient participation. And let me also tell you that the feedback form for all the sessions will be distributed in the last session tomorrow, and there you can put in your individual comments for all the sessions that we have just covered today. Thank you all, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, madam.
God bless.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.